One Piece Supreme Control, Chapter 341-360. Chapter 341 Tsunami. Running quickly on the ground, the long sword behind Whitebeard kept slamming down, causing the ice surface behind him to shatter. It collapsed inch by inch, and long swords fell, as if destroying the world. Under the icy rain of the long sword, Whitebeard's expression was calm, and his legs kept striding forward. He walked as fast as he could, and every sword was dodged by him by the slightest margin. Compared to Whitebeard, the crew of the Whitebeard pirates, Marco, Diamond Yoja, and others faced great difficulties. The generally circling long swords fell from the sky and slammed heavily on the ice surface, causing their complexions to change greatly, and they quickly evacuated from here. Like the end of the world, when you look around, everything in front of you turns out to be a sword. This is a battle that covers two pirate groups, and no one can escape. In just an instant, several people were cut by the sharp sword and cried out in pain. Yang Qing's sword body stood on the long sword, looking indifferently at the Whitebeard below. After a dozen times, Whitebeard's eyes flashed and he looked at the island in the northwest corner. He bent his knees, and the next moment, he rose into the sky. Shock waves continued to spread from under his feet, and for a while, he actually flew. Want to go? The long sword drew a stream of light, and Yang Qing's sword body also disappeared here. Following closely, he stood above the void and clearly saw Whitebeard enter an island. Want to fight on the island? Yang Qing's eyes flashed, his right hand trembled slightly, and the large sword appeared again. On the island with a radius of 30,000 meters, trees, flowers, and rocks flew up tremblingly, and then turned into long swords. Then, it stabbed down towards the entire island. Boom! Under the attack of this wave of sword gods, the huge island collapsed and sank into the sea. Destroying an island is just an instant. At this moment, a stalwart figure flew out of the island and rushed out at an incredible speed. His speed was so fast that it broke through the sonic boom, and when he heard the sound, his figure had already reached the top of Yang Qing's head. The ferocious, crazy, cold face, the robe fluttering in the wind, and the crescent-shaped white beard, it is the Whitebeard. Reaper boy, die! Boom! The shock wave gathered, and then punched Yang Qing in the face. The punch was so powerful that he couldn't react, and it really hit him with one punch. Then, I saw Yang Qing fell down and fell towards the sea. After 2 breaths, Yang Qing's head was a little distorted, and the light flashed back to its original state. His eyes were still cold, and the strong shock wave caused the sea behind him to splash, splashing 100 meters of waves. Fire and water change. The ability to control the fruit was released, and the splashing sea water turned into a monstrous flame under Yang Qing's ability. Then, in Whitebeard's shocked eyes, the flames soared and turned into a roaring tiger, leaping towards the sky. Ow! The tiger's roar was so loud that it came to the top of Whitebeard's head in an instant, and the flames carried a scorching high temperature. Armed-colored domineering appeared on the latter's fists, and the shock wave spread out, with a violent roar. The white beard of the goblet of fire was scattered and fluttered into the sea. There was a sound of chi-chi-chi, and the white mist spread out. Glancing at Yang Qing, who was safe and sound below, Whitebeard's eyes were a little shocked. It didn't take any damage, what's going on? Whitebeard was a little strange, he couldn't understand, how could there be no damage at all? He knew the power of that punch and the shock wave it contained the most. It can easily break a person's head, or even destroy an island. In the air, Whitebeard's 2 arms suddenly moved, and his ability to shake the fruit was pushed to the limit. Boom boom. A series of explosions came out, and the large void in front of it began to twist. After the click sounded, the space seemed to be shattered. Old man, it's not that weak. Fear of rubbing. The voice came out, and Whitebeard's punch was aimed at Yang Qing under him. Not far away, when Yang Qing chased after Whitebeard, the endless sword in the sky turned into a little light and disappeared. The crew of the Whitebeard pirates breathed a sigh of relief just now, but at this moment, the void not far away was shocked again. Daddy, it's Daddy. Dad, is this going to set off a tsunami? The battle between these two people is too terrifying. The crew of the Whitebeard pirates were shocked to see that in the void ahead, the sky began to deflect and tilt, as if a knife had cut it into 2 and 3 pieces. The sea began to boil, and the shock waves began to reverberate. Yang Qing's sword body was constantly twisted, and in front of this majestic shock wave, his sword body became a little unconsolidated. Behind him, a huge wave of thousands of meters set off. Under the power of Whitebeard's shaking fruit, a tsunami was generated. Roar! The sea was roaring, and the sea was rolling, slapping towards Yang Qing in the air. Hoo 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 hoo! Between the ups and downs of the sea, a gust of wind whistled, and lightning flashed and thundered in the sky. Facing this tsunami, this huge natural disaster, this terrifying natural scene that most people expect to be scared to pee their pants, Yang Qing was still expressionless. He suddenly opened his hands. Seeing this scene, Whitebeard's eyes narrowed and his heart was heavy. Strong, this young man is too strong. Strong to the point of monsters, he is very clear. This chapter is not over. Click on the next page to continue reading. How much power does Chu have at the moment? But even so, the other party still did not show any disadvantage. The sea was beating, the wind was roaring, and Whitebeard suddenly sighed. Can this battle be fought for a week? Yes, the battle is not over yet. It's far from over. Their battle has been going on for a long time. At this moment, the full moon is in the sky, covered by dark clouds. Looking up slightly, looking up at the sky, the stars are dotted, and the sea is sparkling. At this moment, Yang Qing let out a loud roar. Ah! The space shook again, and Whitebeard's pupils shrank violently. The tsunami waves in front of them actually stopped. Under Yang Qing's control, this terrifying natural disaster has completely stopped. This kid. Whitebeard narrowed his eyes trembling constantly. Godlike power, inexplicably, this line of words appeared in his mind again. The power of the control fruit radiated out, and the boiling sea was actually pressed to the ground, and it became still. Chapter 342 Kill him. The roaring sea, the surging tsunami, became still. In front of Yang Qing's power to control the fruit, everything is under his control. Standing above the void, Yang Qing opened his hands, behind which was the high waves rushing towards the bottom. It was the whistling of the wind, and the mad surging of the airflow. But at this moment, they all fell into stillness. In the next second, Yang Qing folded his hands towards his arms, and everything under his control moved towards the place where Whitebeard was. The whole world was shaking. Yang Qing's folded hands trembled and stopped in front of him. Behind him, 1,000 Zhang tsunami, surging airflow, resumed its action. Fiercely towards the Whitebeard, the huge movement made the entire space distorted. Boom! The whirlpool swirled above Whitebeard's right fist, a punch burst out, and the tsunami in front was destroyed. The turbulent sea water swept past him on both sides, and then went to the rear. After 3 breaths, Yang Qing and Whitebeard met in the air. Sword chi is vertical and horizontal, and swords of different sizes appear above the vast void. After a short while, he stabbed towards the Whitebeard in the air, but in an instant, a terrifying shock wave shook from the whole body of this tall man. Spreading out like a wave, Yang Qing's face changed, and he saw that the wave passed through his body and went into the distance. The sword body was twisted, and under the attack of this shock wave, there was a tendency to collapse. But fortunately, in the next moment, it stabilized. After the shock wave spread out, it moved towards all directions at an incredible speed. In an instant, all the swords of Skyrim were turned into powder. Boy, come on, next, the old man will use his full strength. It should be enough to fight you for 7 days. Whitebeard's face is full of pride, and it is now. He finally used tactics to equalize the disadvantage of his old age and lack of physical strength to a balanced position. It has been about 7 or 8 hours since the battle, and during these 7 or 8 hours, Whitebeard has been in a state of passive defense. The reason is that because Whitebeard is old, even if he explodes his full power, his stamina is incomparable to someone as young as Yang Qing who is on the upslope in life. Therefore, although he chose to fight head-on, he saved his physical strength abnormally. It wasn't until this moment that they finally brought their physical strength to the same level. Yang Qing's face was expressionless, and Whitebeard's calculations were clearly already clear to him. But he didn't care, he also wanted to meet a stronger Whitebeard. The air became silent and cold. The two kept fighting, and waves of ripples continued to spread out in the air. The sea around them was roaring and churning, and this sea area was stirred up. Crack! The sea began to freeze, and eventually, when the two landed on the ground, the sea froze and turned into an ice-blue world. Looking at each other, their faces are the same solemn, cautious, and there is a touch of excitement and excitement. The strong fight against each other, the blood boils. Bang bang bang. After 2 breaths, the two figures moved quickly on the ice surface. They moved around and moved at an incredible speed. Running, jumping and constantly attacking. The huge power has caused the ice surface here to be devastated. And at the moment when the two were fighting, the top of an ice surface bulged. In the cold wind, on the top of the ice cone, Yang Qing's real body sat cross-legged, expressionless, his eyes tightly closed. GN23 is extremely powerful, but it also has a disadvantage, that is, the real body cannot be damaged in the slightest, otherwise there will be unimaginable disasters. At this time, a breathless figure came to the bottom of Ice Pickle Mountain. The camera swept through the cold wind, and quickly approached the figure. When he took a closer look, it was Blackbeard. After being knocked to the ground neatly by Ace, Blackbeard escaped from the battlefield. He had burns all over his body and became very weak. But being dazed, he actually made him come here. Inadvertently, Blackbeard raised his head, and then clearly saw Yang Qing at the top of Ice Pick Mountain. In just an instant, Blackbeard's complexion changed drastically. He retreated 5 steps in a row towards the rear in horror, and then farted. The stock sat on the ice. Yang Qing's killing intent when he appeared, he felt very real, it was a real desire to kill him. This guy really has a determination to kill himself. What's even more tragic is that he has no ability to resist at all in the hands of the other party. This made him almost urinate in fright, but after a few seconds, Blackbeard saw that Yang Qing on the top of the ice cone did not move at all. Then, he felt the huge roar in the sky on the other side, like thunder and lightning. The cadres on the two ships fought in the night, but the sky in this battlefield was like day. Flame ring. Ace's flames bloomed, reflecting half of the sky red. 100,000 volts, discharge. The discharge of Anilu is a huge light source, which can support all the lights needed for the night battle. Blackbeard was roaring constantly in the sky, like the day and night, and he looked at the figure on the Ice Pick Mountain in fear. Then, he was stunned. This, not him. Some were stunned, some reacted. Blackbeard is very sure that the guy who fought against Whitebeard is Yang Qing. But who is the person on this Ice Pick Mountain? After hesitating for more than 10 seconds, Blackbeard probed, and in the end, the figure of Ice Pickle Mountain remained motionless. No. This chapter is not over. Click on the next page to continue reading. No, it must be him. Well, this. Is it a clone? Blackbeard's eyes widened, thinking of this possibility, so he quickly ran towards Ice Pick Mountain. 30 seconds later, he came to the foot of Ice Pick Mountain. Seeing Yang Qing sitting cross-legged on the top of the mountain, and Yang Qing who was still motionless, Blackbeard was even more sure of his thoughts. It's definitely right, this is the immobile clone. He did not judge wrong, but he was also wrong. Yang Qing, who was sitting cross-legged on the top of the mountain, was not a clone, but the real deity. After the fear in his eyes, Blackbeard's eyes flashed a fierce divine light. Of course, Blackbeard will not let go of the guy who wants to kill him. This clone won't move, that's how it should be. That guy's attention at this time is all on Dad, he shouldn't notice me. Kill him. Chapter 343 _ These thoughts flashed through his mind quickly, and Blackbeard began to get excited. Even if he couldn't really kill the opponent, if he could hurt a single hair on him, it would be enough to make Blackbeard excited. What kind of person is that? The most powerful person among the pirates, the famous person in the world. Such a character can hurt him in the slightest, and it is enough to make him famous all over the world. Desire. Crazy desire was born from Blackbeard's heart. These desires are enough to make him give up his life to take this risk. Overcome fear, overcome all concerns. He began to grasp the prism on Ice Pick Mountain and climbed quickly towards the mountain. Ice Pick Mountain is huge, really like a mountain. After a full quarter of an hour, Blackbeard came to the top of the mountain. He took a few breaths and then looked cautiously at the figure sitting across from him. The other party is an extremely terrifying big man, and the risks he takes are huge. But the risk is worth it. Step by step, move forward. After a short distance of 30 meters, Blackbeard walked for nearly 2 minutes. Then, Yang Qing, who was observing from a distance of 1 meter, was really relieved. Because he found that this is really just a clone, and this clone will not move. Ha, really won't move, really won't move. I won, I'm going to win. Remove this avatar, and the name of my Blackbeard will be resounding all over the world, ha. Blackbeard became excited, and his whole body trembled with excitement. Then, without any hesitation, he pulled out the pistol on his waist and pointed at Yang Qing in front of him. He was still a little scared when things came to an end, but impulse prevailed. The index finger trembled a few times before slamming it down. Bang! The crisp gunshots came out, and on the top of the ice pick, Blackbeard's whole body trembled. Yang Qing, who was constantly battling with Whitebeard, waving the ice sword in his hand and moving around, suddenly trembled and his face changed greatly at this moment. The next moment, he, who was originally extremely flexible, was punched out by Whitebeard. This punch knocked him out for thousands of meters, and then landed heavily on the ice surface, and the light in his whole body was distorted. Kid Reaper, this is your avatar. What a strange trick to have such a powerful force. Whitebeard shouted loudly. However, I guess that your deity should be hiding in an unknown place at the moment. I don't know why you didn't let your deity come and fight with me. Do you despise the old man in your heart? Speaking of the last sentence, Whitebeard threw a punch again. Large pieces of ice were tumbling up, forming ice walls, which came towards Yang Qing like waves. Ripple-like fluctuations, advancing layer by layer, make the air rippling continuously. Yang Qing struggled to stand up, trying his best to stabilize the distorted light that flickered on his body. This deity was actually injured. Who is it? The cold light in his eyes flashed, and he had hidden enough safety and concealment for the deity. However, he was still caught. I must go back immediately, otherwise, I will die. The situation is extremely serious. If I go one step later, I am afraid that the deity will really die. And the death of the deity will make him in the sword body dissipate in an instant. Deeply forgetting the white beard in front of him, Yang Qing stomped his right foot and stepped forward fiercely. Bang! The large-scale fluctuations quickly spread, and the shock waves scattered in circles, and then he rose into the sky, regardless of the white beard behind him, and walked in the direction of the deity. Whitebeard froze for a moment, then got up and chased after him. But the next moment, ripples like ripples began to appear in all directions, in the sky, and even under his feet. In the ripples that spread out, there are countless ice blue long swords rising slowly. With just one glance, Whitebeard realized that there were hundreds of thousands of these long swords. This power is really like a god in a sword. With a sigh, Whitebeard has nothing to fear. This large-scale long sword just takes more time for him. On the top of the ice cone, Blackbeard shivered and looked at the figure in front of him. Hit crooked. He was still nervous after all, his palms were all sweaty, and the index finger that pulled the trigger trembled unconsciously. With this shot, he hit him crookedly and hit Yang Qing on the shoulder, and what he wanted to aim at was the opponent's mouth. Too nervous, one more shot, and it can take care of him. Taking a deep breath, Blackbeard aimed the pistol at Yang Qing's mouth. Then, he settled down and pulled the trigger again suddenly. Bang! The crisp sound of gunshots, accompanied by the rising smoke, came from the top of the ice cone. After 2 breaths, Blackbeard stared blankly at the figure in front of him, his whole body trembling violently and shaking, and a look of extreme fear appeared on his face. Death! 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 Blackbeard screamed, panicking, his voice was out of tune, full of panic. The other party came so soon, and at this moment, Blackbeard realized the importance of the clone to the person in front of him. But it was also the same, and there was despair in his heart. I will never let myself go, he will never let me go. Fear, panic, and despair swept through Blackbeard's mind, making him stunned. This chapter is not over. Click on the next page to continue reading. You're good, lucky, and courageous. The ice blue long sword slid across the sky, and the beautiful light created a graceful arc, and then descended. Yang Qing was indifferent, but a voice full of killing intent came out faintly. Poof! Bright red blood floated out from the sky, and then fell to the ground, emitting heat. Ah! Ah 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 ah! Blackbeard just reacted, howling in pain. A long sword mark appeared on his stomach, and blood was flowing out without money. Yang Qing took another step, and the ice blue long sword stabbed. For this scumbag, he doesn't even need to change his sword moves. It's easy to kill the opponent. Poof! The icy sword edge directly pierced into Blackbeard's left mouth, his pupils suddenly enlarged, and despair and fear appeared in his eyes. This is the nostalgia for life and the fear of death. The long sword was drawn, and bright red blood was thrown out. Blackbeard fell heavily to the ground. Only you, Blackbeard, I will kill. Yang Qing's sword was placed on the latter's neck, and his voice was as cold as slag. Chapter 344 Ah! The Blackbeard on the ground, the blood flowing from Shang's mouth, his body trembled constantly, with nostalgia for the world and despair. He felt that he was doomed, and in front of this guy, he would definitely die. At this moment, it was difficult for him to even move, either because he was dominated by fear, or because his body was too weak. The icy blade of the sword was placed on Blackbeard's neck. Yang Qing's eyes widened, and his right hand suddenly exerted force. An ice-blue cold light flashed on the blade, about to cut off the person's head. But at this moment, a huge wave in the sky suddenly spread. Whitebeard's figure fell from the sky, and a punch had already been thrown. Yang Qing's eyes flashed, and he glanced at the Blackbeard lying on the ground. With a flash, he immediately left here and flew towards the sky. Kid Reaper, actually fled and shot at my son. Whitebeard roared, and his angry expression was beyond words. Boom! The power of that punch spread to the entire Ice Pickle Mountain, causing the entire Ice Pickle Mountain to roll, and it collapsed in an instant. Whitebeard fell down, picked up the seriously injured Blackbeard from the ice cube, and then shattered the ice cube beside him with a punch, and jumped up quickly by the falling ice cube. When the ice cube finally fell and looked at the weak Blackbeard, Whitebeard's eyes flashed with cold killing intent and anger. You actually hurt my son. Reaper boy, you completely pissed me off. Hearing Whitebeard's words, Yang Qing's eyes narrowed, and he was surprised to see that Blackbeard was still alive. It's really big, and its survivability is really strong. Very weak and bleeding a lot, even that sword has penetrated his left shangshang mouth, where his heart is. However, it's really not dead. However, at this moment, Yang Qing has no spare time to manage the Blackbeard. The angry Whitebeard erupted with more powerful power, and he was completely furious. Call! The gust of wind swept past, and a figure appeared in front of Yang Qing, but he had not yet reacted. He was punched into the sky together with the deity behind him, and fell heavily on the ice. The body is twisted, Yang Qing's eyes are solemn. Control the ice cubes and quickly let the deity leave here. But the next second, Whitebeard's shock wave came again. Bang! In the punch, Yang Qing's body twisted again and fell heavily towards the rear. Ah, Reaper boy, old man, I will never spare you. The furious Whitebeard is extremely powerful in combat. His speed surpassed Yang Qing, who flew out, and he already reached the top of Yang Qing's head in a few steps. Then he swung the naginata in his hand, causing the air to tremble. With a bang, he slashed heavily on Yang Qing's body, twisting it again. Stepping on it with one foot, this foot fell on Yang Qing's body, causing the ice surface with a radius of 5 kilometers to collapse and collapse. The two sword lights in Yang Qing's eyes flickered constantly, and countless long swords were born from the void and stabbed towards the white beard, but the result was that they were shattered into ice chips before they came to the terrifying old man. The power of the shock made it difficult for all long swords to approach the furious Whitebeard. Ha! He stepped on it again, shaking the void and shaking. Yang Qing's face was ugly. Sword body, can't support it anymore. In front of this force that can even vibrate atoms and molecules, the sword body could not support it. Yang Qing avoided Whitebeard's last kick, soared into the sky, and walked towards the deity. At this moment, GN23 is no longer effective, and he must integrate into the deity as soon as possible. However, the angry Whitebeard would not let him go so easily. Chasing all the way, Whitebeard's attack in anger is simply devastating. He threw the entire void into chaos, and there were continuous collapses on the ice surface. Under his anger, the naginata swung, and several small islands connected by the frozen sea were involved. It shattered into 5 or 6 pieces and sank. And under this large-scale attack, Yang Qing also suffered the aftermath, which caused his body to be damaged again. By this time, it has started to fluctuate continuously. After more than 10 breaths, Yang Qing's sword body has become a ray of light. He turned his head and glanced at the white beard behind him. He gritted his teeth and rushed directly into the body of the deity. Reaper boy, die! Whitebeard's roar came again. This time, the shock wave covered the size of the island, the sky was cracked, and the ice surface began to explode on a large scale. Molecules, atoms, and the void, everything was shaking. The shock wave was pushed very fast, and it was in front of Yang Qing in an instant. At the critical moment, Yang Qing suddenly opened his eyes. He roared and stretched out his hands. Give me up. Boom. Everything was still, and then an incomparably huge voice came out, and the entire sea area, everything within a radius of 50,000 to 60,000 miles, moved. He started to move towards Whitebeard and quickly gathered. This is an incomparably terrifying momentum and scale. Even the mighty Whitebeard is full of shock in the face of this twist of the world. Heaven and earth have been twisted by this kid. The ice surface is moving towards the sky, and the sky is sinking towards the earth. Everything is squeezing away towards the white beard at the center. The sound of bang 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 kept coming, and the explosion was very loud. In this terrifying large-scale battle, the world has been turned upside down, and everything is unavoidable. The crew members on both sides of the battle were separated in horror and ran in all directions. My! This chapter is not over. Click on the next page to continue reading. OMG, the captain is really moving. What a power! Is he a god? In people's hearts, this strange and terrifying power is not only worshipped, but also contains a trace of awe, like the awe of mortals to gods. At this moment in this life, the scope and power of this blow are extremely terrifying. This is also the limit of Yang Qing's strength. Control everything in 50,000 miles, and in these 50,000 miles, everything is under your control. The transformation of matter and the control of birth and death are all up to him. These 50,000 miles are all my body, and every move is under my control. Whitebeard, are you sure? I can't take it, but I will die. Yang Qing slowly ascended into the sky, with the world closing in behind him. His expression was indifferent, his voice was cold, and he really spoke like a god. Looking up at the terrifying change and the figure in the sky, Whitebeard took a deep breath. Then he burst out laughing. Chapter 345 Ha 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 ha. Let the horses come over. The god of death, I have to fight you for 7 days and 7 nights, and now, only 1 day has passed. On the horizon, a ray of sunlight shines, and the day has passed. This battle has been going on for a day. However, the physical strength of the two is far from reaching the limit, and their battle is still early. Yang Qing stood in the void, looking deeply at the burly and tall figure below, with sharp eyes. The next moment, the world with a radius of 50,000 miles was crushed downwards with his wave. Boom! The world is collapsing, the ice, the air, the wind, the lightning. In this moment the chaos becomes one. Whitebeard, who was in the center of this terrifying disaster, roared up to the sky. In his body, a domineering aura rose into the sky, suffocating the space. This is an area the size of a sea area, allowing Whitebeard to release the power of his entire body at this moment. He heavily inserted the naginata in his right hand into the ice below, and Whitebeard stood slumped, his huge figure stepping under the ice. At this moment, countless cells in his body began to boil and chirped. All over the body, there was actually a white gas-like mist, which became hot and hot. Looking up at the collapsed heaven and earth below, Whitebeard's face became a little grim at this moment. He is not old yet, and his combat power can still unleash the most powerful attack. Above the fists, the shock wave bubbles began to rapidly grow and swell. The whole body of Whitebeard began to have a black aura, and the domineering of the armed color was pushed to the limit. Above, the coverage is tight. Time and space seem to slow down at this moment, and it is very far away from the central battlefield. Marco, Jose, Bister and the others looked at the shocking scene, opened their mouths, opened their jaws, and opened and closed subconsciously, but they couldn't close them no matter what. Dad, can he resist? He kept Blackbeard's injured body on the ground heavily, and Marco's eyes were solemn. Who knows? Yes, who can know if such an attack can be resisted? Buzz, boom. The vibrating sound was like a muffled thunder, spreading throughout the entire sea. The shock wave bubble in Whitebeard's hand became bigger and bigger. At the end, Whitebeard roared loudly, and the speed of the bubble's growth started to increase. After 10 breaths, the bubble was already the size of 2 houses. By this time, Whitebeard's face was pale, but his face was crazy and hideous. The world is pressing down, and the top of Whitebeard's head has been distorted by the world. When it is closed, it is completely covered up. Even, at this moment, he can't even see Yang Qing's figure. Ah! Come on, this blow, let's see who is stronger. With a loud roar, Whitebeard suddenly waved his fists and hit the sky. Boom! Yang Qing's complexion changed, and he spat out a mouthful of blood. In front of this shock wave, his body was also injured. The Whitebeard below, at this moment, is facing a world with a radius of 50,000 miles. The pressure on him, his face is pale, his whole body is shaking, sweat is rolling out, and the ice surface is constantly falling. However, while maintaining the original posture, it has hardly changed. At this moment, his body became a source of continuous release of power, and shock waves continuously burst out from the depths of his body. Buzz! Everything was shaking, the world seemed to be in a shaking mode, the ice, the ground, the sky, twisted, spun, and then shattered. This grand scene lasted for about 30 breaths before everything was settled. At this time, the radius of 50,000 miles has all turned into a wreck. Yang Qing stood in the void, panting, his eyes full of solemnity and admiration. The most powerful man in the world is truly extraordinary. At this point in the battle, both of them were a showdown of devil fruit abilities, and he also added his own swordsmanship. But the other party took it one by one. It is unimaginable to what extent this terrifying man has excavated himself, the ability of the devil fruit. Hoo 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 hoo. Standing on top of the broken ice, Whitebeard's cry was thunderous, and he spit out a mouthful of blood, but it was blood. Cough cough. After coughing a few times, this blow also greatly increased the load on Whitebeard, and the inside of the body was injured. For a while, the entire field was filled with the sound of exhalation from the two of them, and the atmosphere stopped. The battle between the two pirate groups outside the arena also temporarily stopped. They all stared at the two people in the field, watching the chaotic world, swallowing their saliva involuntarily. Too strong, too strong. The head of the god of death is actually so powerful that he can even tie with the old man. These two people are probably the strongest two people in the world. Everyone has such an idea in their hearts. They have never seen anyone stronger than these two. Distant sea level, another sea area not covered by ice. What an amazing battle. That guy, is he already so strong? Mahak, who was sitting on the boat with Erlang's legs crossed, looked at the two figures in shock. They were far apart, but he could clearly see the two of them. At this point, he was terrified beyond measure. That kid, in addition to swordsmanship, devil fruit can. This chapter is not over. Click on the next page to continue reading. Power, so terrifying. Really, like a god. The battle between the two seemed to have entered the intermission time, and they were all breathing heavily, and no one launched an attack. Next, it's time for a head-to-head contact. The devil fruit contest is over. Endurance, physical strength, fighting ability. Next, test the two of them. These are the comprehensive strengths. Mahak's eyes were deep and he could see clearly. Whitebeard, it's not good for him. Yes, Whitebeard's attack power is very strong. This is something that anyone must admit, but, after all, this person is old. Huh. Mahak suddenly turned his head to look behind him. His pupils shrank suddenly. Are they all here? This time, it's really lively. Chapter 346 is still going on. On the distant sea level, black dots are moving towards here at a speed visible to the naked eye. In the eagle's sharp eyes, the figures on these ships are clearly reflected. 4 Emperor Kaido. And, Shanks. 2 of the 4 emperors came here. Shanks looked stern, standing on the bow, solemnly watching the battle between the two in the field. His robes fluttered in the wind, with awe-inspiring momentum. Kaido, on the other hand, looked excited. Looking at the two people in the field, he roared excitedly, full of fighting spirit, and he seemed to be unable to bear the next moment he would walk to the field and participate in the battle. These two people are indeed here. Mahak narrowed his eyes, but did not move. He turned his head and continued to watch the battle between the two on the field. Yangqing was in the sky, and the white beard was on the ground. There was a barren ice surface around the two of them. White air came out, and the distorted space returned to calm with time. The gasping sound of the two came out clearly. After facing each other for half an hour, Yangqing, who was standing in the sky, let out a sigh of relief and spoke slowly. It seems that there is no way to tell the winner. Ha ha ha, yes, Reaper boy, let's fight hard. Whitebeard raised his head and laughed. Shaking his head, Yangqing said helplessly, it's very unfair to you, an old man. Old man, I don't admit it, I'm old. Whitebeard threw a punch, ripples appeared in the sky again, Yangqing's figure flashed, fell from the air, stood on the ice surface, and looked at each other. Devil fruit ability, swordsmanship, can't make you and me happy, so. Yangqing's right hand trembled, and the ice blue blade slammed out, mercilessly inserted into the ice surface thousands of meters away, until it fell into the handle. Come on, against the power of your body and mine. Physical strength, stamina, attack power, and fighting power, these are what a strong man really possesses. Hard power. Whitebeard raised his eyebrows, and a smile appeared on his face. Yes, Reaper boy, you fit the old man's appetite very well. He picked up the huge naginata, and then gave the naginata a savage meal, making it stand directly on the ice, pausing steadily. Walking forward with great strides, the two stopped at the same time after 13 breaths. One looked down, the other looked up, and looked at the person who was close at hand, with smiles on their faces. The old man never thought that someone like you would appear. The dull voice with some laughter came out, and Whitebeard felt a little emotional. At this moment, the two people, standing face to face, did not make a move. I didn't expect that one day I would have a battle with the strongest man in the world. It made me feel really excited. Whitebeard narrowed his eyes, then laughed. Ha 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 ha. Yangqing also laughed, and for a while, the laughter of the two spread throughout the sea. At the sea level in the distance, the black dots came quickly and clearly. Shanks and Kaido's ship caught the eyes of everyone present, making the atmosphere a little tense. Ha ha ha, what an exciting duel! Kaido roared like a beast, shouting loudly. As soon as he finished speaking, a strong arrogance came from Shanks beside him. Kaido, I won't let you do whatever you want in this fight. The smile on Kaido's face faded, becoming a little grim, turning his head to look at Shanks' calm expression. What a nasty guy, are you forcing me to play against you? Huh. A sword chi suddenly slashed across the sea and came directly towards Kaido's ship. Behind him, a figure rushed out, and then blocked the sword chi in front of it, defeating the sword chi. Hawkeye, Mihawk, the world's greatest swordsman. Kaido squinted at the figure far away in front of him. Quiet, don't interfere with this duel on top of the world. The cold voice came, and Mihawk's position was already obvious. Humph. Kaido glanced at the front and the side next to him, and let out a heavy hum, and the eager expression faded a lot. Then watch it. Old guy, or novice, which one is stronger? Kaido was sitting on the deck with a butt, really posing as a spectator. Shanks took a deep look at Kaido, then pressed the right hand of the western sword on his waist, slowly relaxed, and retracted it. In the center of the battlefield, Whitebeard and Yang Qing looked at each other. Then let's get started. Yang Qing smiled and looked very relaxed. Whitebeard nodded, then suddenly shot. Bang! A huge wave of air swept out from the center of the two, and the ice surface was not cracked. This punch directly hit Yang Qing's face, causing the latter's left foot to leave the ground, his body's center of gravity detached, and there is a tendency to fly out. But after a breath, Yang Qing's eyes were sharp, and he stepped on it abruptly to stabilize his balance. Then, he punched directly at the belly of the tall figure in front of him. Bang! The air wave rushed out from behind the white beard, and the huge white beard's face changed, and there was a touch of pain. Then, Whitebeard bent down slightly, and his sturdy arms slammed down. This chapter is not over. Click on the next page to continue reading. Yang Qing raised his fist to resist and attacked with his elbow. Bang! As if two giant mountains collided, the terrifying force made the two of them unable to bear the impact of this force and took 3 steps back. But in the next second, the two smashed the ground, but they were entangled again. Bang, 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 bang. The continuous, muffled thunder-like sound spread throughout the entire sea area. Air waves surged everywhere, and the ice surface of this sea area suffered unimaginable destruction. On the sea, the waves were undulating. Shanks, Mihawk, Kaido and others watched the battle quietly, their faces were full of calm and solemnity. This is the world's first decisive battle. Who will be stronger? And how long will this battle last? Two of the most powerful figures in the world, the peak and peak kings among the pirates, just punched and kicked, waving their own strength, expending their greatest physical strength, squandering, roaring, attack the opponent. Looking around the battlefield, the cadres and members of the pirate groups from both sides were also covered in blood, and they fought hard to attack each other. Gradually, time passed, and the day passed. This is already the 3rd day, and the two have destroyed 7 islands, turning a sea area into a pitted ice surface. However, their battle continues. Chapter 347. Is it over? The two at the top of the strong threw their fists constantly. They roared, almost abandoned all the abilities they had used before, and attacked each other in the most brutal and direct way. The sound like a muffled thunder continued to come out. They moved around and appeared on the ice surface of this wide sea, and the battle could not stop for a moment. Roar! Ow! The roar of a beast came from the mouths of the two. They kept separating and merging together, giving each other the deadliest and most violent blow. This is the battle of life, the strongest battle. On the 4th day, the two were still fighting. The ice surface on a large area of the sea was shattered, and cracks appeared. On the 5th day, the low roar was still coming out, bloodstains began to appear on the bodies of the two, and the faces were also covered with bruises. The violent confrontation left both of them injured to varying degrees. They are still fighting, and at this time, the faces of the people watching the battle are already full of shock. The two were fighting against each other purely by physical strength, without any other power mixed in, but even so, they had been fighting for such a long time. On the sixth day, with a loud bang, Yang Qing was punched thousands of meters away, and fell heavily into the ice. Whitebeard gasped heavily, bending down to take a deep breath. "Stinky boy, I have said that I am not old." His old and dull voice spread across the sea with a hoarse voice, containing a touch of majesty and pride. Yes, he is not old yet, he still has the sufficient physical strength, stamina, and powerful attack power. At this time, the crew members who were fighting against each other had already started to lie down one after another, and they had reached their limit. Whether it is devil fruit ability, or physical strength, endurance, can no longer be compared with these two people. Breathing heavily, the weak will close their eyes at any time. The crew of the two pirate ships stared at themselves and lay down unwillingly. Really hateful. Actually, they didn't defeat the opponent. The ice chips were flying, the wind was blowing, the world was clear again. Yang Qing stood up staggeringly. At this moment, his robes are already covered with blood, his arms are twisted at a strange angle, his face is full of bruises, and when placed on top of outsiders, he cannot be recognized at all. "Big brother!" Lolita's cry spread throughout the sea, and looking at the figure that was so weak that she would fall down at any time, little Loli was very scared and worried. The corner of his mouth twitched, and an ugly smile appeared on Yang Qing's face. "I don't fall down so easily. Don't worry." Walking forward step by step, the fierce beast-like aura of Yang Qing's body swept out again. He was very slow, but he was brewing a terrible aura. When standing in front of Whitebeard, the two waved their fists again and started a new round of battle. The roar sounded again, and the battle began to look a bit tragic. This battle is another day. In the blink of an eye, it was the 7th day. Woohoo! On this day, there was almost only a heavy breathing sound between the two of them. Their breathing was heavy, like dull thunder. The two of them almost reached their limit, struggling for half a day with each punch, using all their strength, and then taking a big breath of fresh air. Yang Qing bent down and stared at the tall white beard in front of him, only feeling that his lungs, heart, and any of his internal organs were about to burst. It was a feeling of extreme pain. His whole body, from the epidermis to the inside, almost suffered a fatal blow from Whitebeard. And the other side, too. The blood on the corner of his mouth was so distinct, and a thick bloody aura permeated from the huge figure of the Whitebeard. The most powerful man in the world finally ushered in this tragic scene on this day. This was his worst scene. Whitebeard even laughed out loud. His cry was like a broken blower, very tragic. Hee, lousy has never been so miserable. You boy, are really capable. You old guy, it's really scary, you're already so old, why don't you lie down? Yang Qing growled, his whole body was standing on the ice, unable to move. At this moment, even raising his finger was as difficult as lifting thousands of mountains. Whitebeard lowered his head, his right arm trembled vigorously, and the sweat on his forehead mixed with the blood and fell on the ice, but in the end, he was still unable to raise his arm. You kid, you didn't lie down. Old man, how could old man lie down? This is my time, the time of my Whitebeard. The low roar contained strong domineering and terrifying willpower. In this low roar, the arm that was extremely difficult to lift was actually lifted up by the Whitebeard, and then again wrapped in terrifying power and waved towards Yang Qing. Old guy. I don't care whose era it is. This battle, I have a reason not to lose. Even if I die, I won't lie down. Yang Qing's face suddenly turned hideous, and his roar was terrifying. And, in this state of being on the verge of a limit, he still waved his right hand again. Then, two arms, one thick and the other small, suddenly met in the wind. Bang! This chapter is not over. Click on the next page to continue reading. A circle of air waves spread out, the expressions of the two changed, and the sound of clack came out at the same time. They let out a scream of pain, and flew out in the direction of their backs, hitting the ice heavily, letting the ice chips fly. Is it over? Sea level, on the Kaido boat, an ordinary crew member asked in shock. No one spoke, and at this most critical juncture, when approaching the peak, no one wanted to speak. In the end, who will be the first? The number one man in the world, is he going to change and transfer it to the top of another person's head? Ship, Captain, these two are very weak, if we take them. The slight voice attracted the attention of everyone present. Shanks and Mihawk all looked towards the Kaido pirates. However, before the other crew members' words were finished, Kaido's fist was already swung. The majestic power directly crushed the person, turning the latter into a blood mist. Chapter 348 Never Lose. Kaido, I won't be reduced to such a point. Besides, my pirate group doesn't need to be spineless, principled, scumbags. The voice is sonorous and decisive. Kaido's unhesitating behavior made everyone present clearly understand why this ruthless pirate with the title of King of Beasts stood in such a position. Although he is cruel and ruthless, he still has his own bottom line and his own principles, and is willing to abide by the shallowest morality among pirates. Moreover, with Shanks and his gang and Hawkeye Mihawk by his side, Kaido also knew very well that he couldn't do anything. His eyes focused on the battlefield in front of him again, glanced at the crew members of the two pirates who were lying on the ground and couldn't move for half a minute, and then threw them on the two people who were covered by ice debris in the torn ice surface. The ice fog covered the line of sight, and it was impossible to see what the two of them were like at the moment. However, as time passed, after the breeze dispelled the barrier, the figures of the two appeared. The pupils shrank, and the people present were all staring at the two of them. In the center of the torn-apart pit, the two of them lay there, panting heavily, their bodies heaving and shaking everywhere. Trembling. This is the residual impact after being hit by a huge force. It is also the wailing of extremely tired, overworked cells. Everywhere in their body is neighing, sending out the greatest resistance signal. I don't want to fight anymore, every part of my body is howling so loudly. However, it was forcibly reversed by the willpower of the two. Hoo. The sound of heavy breathing continued to be heard, and the two men spewed hot white mist from their mouths and noses. This was the high-temperature gas brought out after extreme sports, and the water in their bodies was violently increasing. It was evaporated into white fog during the event. What kind of battle is this? The two of them seemed to be transformed. At this moment, the two were lying on the ground, seemingly unable to move. The people outside the venue were staring at it, watching any details of the two of them, including the flutter of eyelashes, the shaking of fingers. Moved. The first thing to move is Whitebeard. The hearts of everyone seemed to move together, and some people exclaimed. Dylan's, whose face was tightly pressed against the ice, couldn't move any longer, and opened his eyes. But as far as the eye can see, there is a piece of ice-blue ice, and it is impossible to see the situation on the field. Captain, how's it going? Did you lose? Doubtful, worried, but helpless, this mentality, tormented every nerve of Dylan's. In the eyes of Shanks and others, the right index finger of the Whitebeard lying in the pit suddenly trembled. Then, like a lit lead, his entire gigantic figure moved. Although it was very difficult to move, every time he moved, he would let out an old groan of pain. However, Whitebeard was indeed moving. He supported the ice and began to stand up slowly. After trying this movement 5 times, he finally squatted on the ground slowly with his hands on the ground. Immediately afterwards, he started trying to stand up. Withdrawing his hands suddenly, his huge body shook violently, as if he was about to fall down again. However, at this time, his eyes slammed sharply, and he stopped abruptly. In the end, this huge figure actually stood up like that. He swayed, shaking weakly, and stood up. Looking at Yang Cheng, who was still lying motionless on the ground, Whitebeard let out a thunderous laugh. Ha ha ha, can't you get up? Death boy. I said, this is my time. His loud roar spread throughout the entire sea area, clearly reaching Yang Qing's ears. Yang Qing was still motionless, as if he was really knocked down. He couldn't move any longer at this moment. The breathing of everyone present was a little stagnant, and they stared at the two people in the field. As the victory or defeat determined. Suddenly, a crisp voice spread throughout the audience. Big brother, stand up. Stand up. It's Lolita, and the little Lolita's cry was so loud, it spread throughout the world of frost and echoed throughout the sea. Shank's eyes turned to the bow of the Reaper, and on the young figure, his pupils shrank. That little girl. The Overlord is domineering. How is this possible? Mahawk was even more shocked, and the whole person sat up. Whitebeard's burly figure, under the impact, suddenly trembled and almost fell, but after being stagnant, it stopped abruptly. Then, his eyes turned to the figure on the bow. This little girl, where did she come from? Really, a good junior. There was a hint of compassion in his eyes, and a smile appeared on Whitebeard's face. Then, everyone looked at the little girl who was holding back the tears of worry, suddenly turned their heads, picked up the drum hammer on the deck, and hit the big drum hard. Boom! Dong 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 dong. The rhythmic drums began to sound, spreading throughout the battlefield, even driving the hearts of everyone. This is the drum of war, which contains the power to stimulate the will to fight and make the blood boil. This chapter is not over. Click on the next page to continue reading. You said that as long as you hear the drums, everyone who fights will have infinite courage. You are my eldest brother, an invincible eldest brother, a towering tree, sheltering the wind and rain. How could you just fall down like this? You will stand up, Lolita will always believe. With 2 tears on her face, little Lolita tapped the drum face and muttered. On the ice, the dull drum sound entered Yang Qing's ears. The latter trembled, and his right finger moved slightly. Moved, and death moved. Immediately afterwards, one after another voice spread across the battlefield. Stand up, he got up too. It's not over yet, it's not over yet. The excited voice made the audience lively. When little Loli heard these voices, her face was filled with joy, and she tapped the drum face harder. Dong 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 dong. In the sound of the drums, Yang Qing's weak body finally stood up. With endless sternness in his eyes, Yang Qing bent down and stood up, suddenly looking at the white beard opposite. It's not over yet, a deep voice came out. The next moment, Yang Qing took a difficult step, ran towards the opponent resolutely, raised his fists high, with an indomitable will, and the will to win that must not lose. In my mind, the faces of the friends who were lying on the ground appeared. Little Loli flashed the way she was trying to beat the drums, and Yang Qing's fists were suddenly clenched. This battle must not be lost. Why? I do not know either. But what about him? Chapter 349 Results. In the process of moving forward, the thin body swayed from side to side, staggering from time to time, as if it would fall on the ice at any time. However, Yang Qing's determined expression never changed. His teeth were clenched tightly, and the sweat from his forehead continued to flow down and fell on the ice. His steps were heavy and firm, and he kept walking forward. Every step of the way, he is enduring enormous pain, which is unbearable for ordinary people. At the same time, the white beard opposite also roared and took his heavy steps. The old man who is number 1 in the world is enduring even greater pain at this moment. Time is getting very, very slow. For nearly 5 minutes, the two stood face to face. Hoo 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 hoo. The sound of heavy breathing and the muffled roar of thunder, the two clenched their fists, brewing hard, gathering strength. But every time I squeeze it, it hurts to let go again. The cells were about to be torn apart, and blood leaked from their palms and bodies. Everything in the body is against their will. Boy, let's beat whoever punches first. Whoever punches first wins. Whitebeard's low voice came out, and the blue veins on his forehead were high and raised, like a chulong. The pupils were already filled with fierce light, and the blood-red color made Yang Qing's eyes extremely terrifying. At this moment, he didn't make a sound and was silent. Gathering all the strength in silence, his hands trembled and trembled violently, trying to lift and wave to defeat the enemy in front of him. For a full 5 minutes, the two tried countless times, and their right hands were shaking. Finally, their fists were raised. At the same time, the two raised their fists at the same time, and then waved to each other tremblingly. The boy's willpower is really good. Then let's decide the outcome of this punch. Whitebeard's voice came out again, and it was hard to believe that he could still grit his teeth and speak with disjointed I will lose. Yang Qing roared out like a voice that popped out of his teeth, and punched out abruptly. Bang, bang. 2 shock waves rushed out from behind the bodies of the two of them, breaking through the space, and a sharp scream of, "Shoo," was heard, and then quickly dissipated. Pat. Blood dripped from the corners of the two's mouths, and this time, the huge force did not take the two of them off the ground and fly out of here. They stood up straight, staring at each other. He bent down, gasping for breath. "Jian, if you can't hold on, just fall down. Old man." Yang Qing gritted his teeth and opened his mouth, every cell in his body whimpered. "You haven't fallen yet, how can this old man fall?" Whitebeard's voice came out like a muffled thunder, making people feel that every word he said was exhausting his whole body. Every part of the two bodies was shaking, and exhaustion and fatigue swept through their bodies. At this time, even their willpower, they have reached the limit. Punch up again. However, they clenched their teeth and cracked their gums, but they still didn't throw the punch. The limit, both of them have reached the limit. Willpower, physical fitness, all have reached their limits. Call. Suddenly, a breeze blows. The wind blew through their bodies, and with this blow, their bodies began to collapse. Like the last straw that broke the camel's back, the two of them couldn't hold on any longer. Starting from the head, then the body, and finally fell heavily on the ice. Two world-famous powerhouses were lying on the ice like dead dogs at this moment, gasping for breath. The limit, really the limit. At this moment, the two of them could no longer exert any strength. From a distance, they fell to the ground at the same time. After waiting for half an hour, Shanks and Mahawk looked at each other and let out a deep breath. Kaido looked at the two people on the ground, a ray of light flashed in his eyes, and the corners of his mouth slanted slightly. Next, everyone brought the boat close to the shore of the ice. Mahawk stood on the shore, and then one person blocked in front of Kaido's big boat. Behind him, 6 or 7 of the cadres of the red-haired pirates stayed behind and stood behind Hawkeye. "Here, no passage." Hawkeye's icy words, and the sword energy with killing intent, shocked everyone in the Kaido pirates, and made the pirates who were about to disembark stunned. "Haha, okay, don't worry, I'll watch." The world-famous Armageddon. It ended in a draw. Kaido looked up to the sky and laughed, but stopped and did not move forward. Shanks took a deep look at Kaido who was laughing, and then started to spread out with the remaining crew. Checking the people who were injured in this battle, he came to Yang Qing and Whitebeard step by step. "Can you still stand up?" Looking down at the two figures below, Shanks said in a low voice. The two were silent, only the dull breathing sound came out, but there was no response. "I see." After pondering for a while, Shanks bent down and lifted the two of them, one shoulder, and then carried them towards the shore. Whitebeard was huge, Yang Qing was small, and their bodies were filled with the stench of sweat mixed with blood. But the redhead, one of the 4 emperors, didn't care at all. He walked towards the shore step by step, and at this time, the crew members were also exhausted by the two groups of pirates, or the injured pirates walked over step by step. In the distance, the Reaper and Whitebeard's ships sailed slowly, heading here. This chapter is not over. Click on the next page to continue reading. "Captain, Dad." Dao Dao's exclamations came from the Whitebeard fleet that was getting closer and closer, and they were all shocked when they saw Whitebeard's motionless appearance. The strongest man in the world would actually be in such a state, which is simply shocking to them. Quick, quick, go and see how Dad is doing. Ship doctor, ship doctor. There was panic in the fleet. A few more suppressed shouts came out, making the pirates calm down. Quiet, idiot, didn't you see it? That's Shanks of the Four Emperors, and Kaido. These two guys are here too. The sound of gasping breaths came out, and the members of the Whitebeard pirates became nervous. The Four Emperors, the existence that kept pace with the Whitebeard pirates, was very terrifying. At this time, Whitebeard was injured, and the cadres were seriously injured on the ground. With their strength, they really couldn't resist the attack of the two emperors. The atmosphere at the scene became a little tense, and every crew member of the Whitebeard pirates trembled. Shaking, worried. However, they had to move forward. Chapter 350 Responsibility. On the Reaper, little Loli was full of worry, clumsily driving the Reaper toward here. Soon, as they approached the ice, Shanks' deep voice came over. Are you here? Then drag your captain, back to the boat. Shanks' voice made the people on the Whitebeard pirate ship startled, and then they reacted immediately, with obvious relief on their faces. Facing the pressure of the Four Emperors, it is really too huge. At this moment, the Reaper slowly drove over. On the boat, there was only Loli alone. This strong little girl, gritted her teeth and endured the fierce eyes of the crew of the Whitebeard pirates, came to Shanks. What's your name? Shanks asked Loli with a gentle gaze. My name is Loli, Loli said loudly. Okay, Loli, can you move your friends to the boat one by one? Shanks stared at Loli and asked in a deep voice. Yes, Loli responded loudly. Shanks didn't say a word, and silently watched the young child get off the Reaper and then came to the front of the Reaper officers. Gritting his teeth, he used all his strength to drag his companions onto the boat one by one. In the first and second time, the little Loli succeeded despite her efforts and hard work. But by the fourth or fifth time, she was exhausted. However, this strong little girl did not make any cry, but gritted her teeth silently, and even dragged the cadres on the death god onto the boat. When little Loli moved to the eighth person, the cadres of the Whitebeard pirates had all been moved onto the Moby Dick by the crew. At this time, the crew just turned their eyes to the little Loli, and there was a stern look in their eyes, and a fierce light flashed. Even if she is a little girl, she is also an enemy. The mighty Whitebeard, who is in a high position, won't take action against young opponents, but they are not necessarily. Finally, little Loli struggled with all her strength, and finally came to Yang Qing, then bent down, lifted Yang Qing, and carried her on her young back. She trembled and started walking towards the Reaper, but because she had really run out of strength, it had already seemed extraordinarily hard. Sweat was dripping from his head, and his muscles were shaking. A young girl is still a child after all. The crew on the Reaper had exhausted all her strength. Luo, Li, Yang Qing's weak voice entered Loli's ears. The latter was startled, and then fell to the ground with one foot. Her knee burst open, and bright red blood flowed out. The pain made the little girl burst into tears. However, there was still no sound. Yasuo, who was behind Shanks, trembled in his heart, and was about to help Loli. But he was blocked by Shanks and shook his head. This is a matter of their pirate group. Even if she is just a child, as long as she is a member of the God of Death, she should take the responsibility of this pirate group. You don't have a little girl yet, can you see clearly? Yasuo wanted to say something, but in the end he didn't say it. He took a step back and couldn't bear to look at this young girl in his heart. Little Loli got up at this moment and started to move slowly towards the death god. Stop! Yang Qing's weak voice came out, causing Loli to tremble. Gritting her teeth, Loli walked forward step by step with Yang Qing on her back. There seemed to be a mountain on her back, pressing her to give up at all times. However, this strong girl seems to be born with such a temperament. She never let go of her hand, and she never fell to the ground. At this moment, she seems to have become another Yang Qing. Her willpower runs through her body, and she will not fall down. What she wants to accomplish, she must accomplish. This is freedom and the essence of pirates. From a certain moment, this girl who was just a little girl from a commoner's family has truly grown into a little pirate. Along the way, little Loli fell 8 times, with multiple abrasions on her arms and legs, and blood on her robe. There were always crystal tears in her eyes, but she never let go of her hand. Half an hour, a full half an hour. Little Loli just dragged Yang Qing to the boat, and she finally completed the task. At about 10 years old, she has unimaginable strength. At this moment, she is also a hero, a little hero. Her heroic appearance was seen by the people present, all the pirates, and was deeply impressed. The string plate hummed up, and the death god roared and trembled slightly. The crew of the Whitebeard pirates, on the other hand, stared at each other's pirate ship with fierce eyes, and released a slight killing intent. These low-level crew members of the Whitebeard pirates do not have the kindness of captains. What kind of mercy do pirates with their heads tied to their belts need? At this time, they already had the intention to kill the people on the weak death god. A group of people who can threaten the Whitebeard pirates, even if they are idiots, they know the seriousness of this matter. And Whitebeard, lying on the deck at the moment, motionless, was receiving rescue from the ship's doctors. The situation was very unfavorable to everyone on the death god for a while. Lori, keep the ship safe, and you will be needed at that time. Yang Qing's words echoed clearly in Loli's ears. Little Loli gritted her teeth and stared at the large number of vicious pirates on the opposite side, and then looked at everyone on the deck. Finally, she turned her head silently and walked to the rudder. Buzzing. The Reaper was activated, cut through the sea and started heading towards an unknown place. This chapter is not over. Click on the next page to continue reading. The war is over, but danger has just come. Yang Qing was lying on the deck, staring at the sky, breathing heavily. At this moment, he couldn't even move. Is it possible to entrust such an important task to her? A doubt appeared in Yang Qing's heart, and he began to worry about Loli's safety. With the departure of the Reaper, the Whitebeard pirates also roared and started, and then followed the tail of the Reaper. Kaido looked up at such a scene and let out a loud laugh. Ha 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 ha, it's really funny. Can you survive? I'm really curious. After a loud laugh, Kaido left here with his fleet. For him, the battle is over. Chapter 351 Extremely Dangerous. Shanks looked at the 2 distant ships, then suddenly pulled out the western sword and swung it out. The twisted sword energy directly severed the sea that Whitebeard was walking on, and the crew members on it were startled and looked at Shanks behind in horror. What does this mean? Shanks, are you going to join our war? Hearing this sentence, Shanks' eyes narrowed, his robe fluttered, his red hair rose with the wind, and a dignified and domineering aura emanated. Shen Ning's words also came from his air. No, I just wanted to say. Everyone, can you give me some face? This war is over. The entire sea area was suddenly silent, the overlord-like aura enveloped the huge area, and the crew members of the Whitebeard pirates were ashen, unable to speak for a long time. But looking at the opposite side, the crew of the red-haired pirates, who had already drawn their western swords and prepared for battle, felt as disgusting as eating flies, but they couldn't say it. Facing Shanks, one of the 4 emperors who were ready to go, the crew of the Whitebeard pirates finally chose to retreat. Looking at the long seawater gap in front of them, and then looking at the Grim Reaper, they reluctantly retracted their eyes and then changed their way. 4 emperors, they have no choice. Can only choose to end, choose to give Shanks a face. Looking at the end of the war, Shanks and Mihawk looked at each other before shaking their heads, then got on their ship and left here. Grim Reaper versus Whitebeard, this battle finally spread out after 7 days. Then, the world was shocked. Different voices are starting to come out all over the world, originating from different identities. The Grim Reaper versus Whitebeard, it was a draw. The Grim Reaper is so powerful, it's terrifying. Is Whitebeard getting old? It's actually a draw with death, that is to say, is there one more man in the world? No, maybe they can't be called the strongest anymore. What kind of attitude would the sea soldiers have? It's really interesting. Just after I made up my mind to attack the god of death, such shocking news came. The legendary god of death had a fight with the man who was number 1 in the world. A tie. That is to say, it won't be long before the sea soldiers face the hatred of a white-bearded character. Ha ha ha, it's really interesting. At the entrance to the New World, the Navy has dispatched 2 generals, but they still haven't won the Death God's territory. Instead, they have completely offended the Death God pirates. There has been news that the Death Pirates have officially withdrawn from the Wuhai sequence. Wuhai has reshuffled the cards, and the God of Death is on the world's strongest stage. This shocking news really makes people all over the world unable to sleep for several days. That kid, he's already so powerful. It's amazing. At present, the traces of the Whitebeard pirates and the Death God pirates cannot be found. At this stop, you can see that both of their pirates are seriously injured. Maybe, it will take several years to recover. Come here. Definitely, after all, it was a collision between 2 behemoths. I can't even imagine that the young Reaper was actually tied with Whitebeard. I can't imagine, if in a few years, the God of Death will grow up for a while, won't he step on the throne of the Thief King of Shanghai City? There was a lot of discussion, and no one could stop this mighty event. In history, this battle is called the Battle of the Eve, and the Battle of the Eve of the Pirate King and the King is decided. The impact on the entire pirate system, and even the entire world, is extremely far-reaching. After this battle, the Whitebeard pirates disappeared. The main cadre members of the Shinigami also disappeared. At the entrance of the New World, after learning this shocking news, the command issued an order without hesitation. Mad, all retreat, all retreat. The Navy wants territory, we give it to them, no, no more. Ha 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 ha, we are pirates, we are the freest warriors in the sea, all evacuated, and the site was given to them. Wow, ha ha, our next goal, but one piece, what are these broken grounds worth? The captain has paved the way for us, now, all gather in Dressrosa, and join us to find our captain, find our king. 7 days, just 7 days of work, the Marines were horrified to discover that the Death God pirates, which were extremely difficult to deal with a few days ago, actually left without a single one, and all of them left this place. A huge fleet began to sway mighty in the New World. No one dared to stop it. The flag of the sickle and skeleton made every pirate panic, even the 4 emperors. At this moment, the name of the Death God pirates became the strongest in the world. Different from the age when Whitebeard seemed a bit old, the God of Death seems to have started a new era. The entrance to the New World was easily won, and the naval soldiers were successfully deployed, which changed the situation in the New World, but the naval soldiers were not really happy. On the contrary, in the Marine Corps headquarters, in the office, the faces of every boss are full of solemn expressions. Now, it's really troublesome. Warring States rubbed his temples, his face extremely ugly. The Reaper disappeared, and the entire Reaper pirates entered the depths of the New World to find their captain. At the entrance to the New World, all are controlled by Marines. The dynamics of the world are changing rapidly, and it is almost impossible for anyone to imagine. The third of the 4 emperors has fought thoroughly, and his position has been completely consolidated. This guy doesn't. This chapter is not over. Click on the next page to continue reading. It's for the Pirate King. Absolutely, absolutely, absolutely cannot let him succeed. In this sea, there cannot be another king. The warring states roared angrily. During his tenure as a marshal, the root cause of such chaos appeared. Issued a new order, and then dispatched a large number of Marines to the New World. I will start the last wave of sweeping to completely remove the dregs on these seas. The naval system began to operate rapidly, and orders were passed down one by one, and a large number of Marines were stationed in the 4 seas in the New World. Pirates on the sea have entered a tense period. There have been pirates dying and being arrested, and the battle between the Navy and the pirates has entered a particularly intense moment from this moment on. And a new order, a reward order, was also issued. The 7 Wuhai are all established, the new Wuhai, Flamingo, Da Flamingo. Captain of the Death God Pirates, Death God Lucifer, a bounty, 1.7 billion Bailey, regardless of life or death, note, extremely dangerous. Chapter 352 Timing. The wind of the sea was blowing quietly, and the air with a salty smell felt free even to breathe. In this free, deep sea, there is endless mystery and vastness. The era of the great pirates has begun, and every moment there are pirates who let go of everything and plunge into the sea with a free heart. A year has passed since the battle on the Eve. The sea has undergone drastic changes over the years. The first is that the pirate forces are reshuffled. The Death God pirates jumped on it and became the new emperor. In the sea, there have been 5 emperors since then. The 4 emperors each occupied a sea area, and the 5th emperor, Death God, wandered among these 4 sea areas, and finally came to the nearest place to Ralph Drew. They are only one step away from that mysterious treasure. At the entrance to the New World, the Death God pirates all gave up, and they became old neighbors with Whitebeard at this final terminal. The 2 sides were separated by a sea, but they were silent. During the week of that battle, it took half a year for both sides to recover. Then, there was a huge change in the power of the pirates, which shocked the world. The sea breeze is blowing gently, the wind and waves increase greatly. Looking up at the sky, there are no clouds, a clear blue. On a small island, 2 figures sat on the ground. One of them is very tall, while the other is a little thin. So, the god of death, didn't you come to fight me this time? Whitebeard's voice buzzed like thunder and said loudly. With a smile in his eyes, Yang Qing raised the wine glass in his hand and touched the Whitebeard. I brought wine, of course not to fight you. Oh, then what are you doing? Whitebeard asked suspiciously, looking down at Yang Qing's face. Call. The breeze blew. Yang Qing looked up to the sky. Looking at the blue sky, he suddenly fell silent, and only spoke after a long time. The world is boiling, Whitebeard, and the scorching bubbles have been brewing and rising. Wait a day, that temperature rises to a terrifying level, then the lid that covers the freedom will explode with a bang. A lot of free steam will fill the whole world. The opportunity has come. With excitement, trembling in his voice, Yang Qing was a little crazy at this moment. What do you want to say? Death boy, Whitebeard said coldly. I'm going to be the pirate king. Yang Qing suddenly looked directly at Whitebeard, and an extremely domineering momentum rushed out, and the entire sea area was still. The atmosphere between the 2 suddenly froze. Whitebeard stared at Yang Qing's eyes tightly. His old face was expressionless. 10 seconds later, he said, the time has not come yet. One Piece, not only for pirates, you also need to let the world recognize you. Yang Qing stood up slowly, his expression became extremely cold. As he got up, the violent momentum spread out, causing chaos in this area. Of course I know that this time, I'm just here to inform you. One Piece, I'm determined. Suddenly, Yang Qing turned and left. His domineering arrogance became weaker and weaker as he walked towards the shore step by step, and then disappeared. Whitebeard looked at Yang Qing's disappearing back. His eyes became low, and he sighed after pondering for a while. You boy, did you come to book with me? When the time comes, how about it for you? After taking a sip of the drink, Whitebeard's complexion became a little complicated. A year has passed, and his combat effectiveness has declined faster than he imagined. If there is another battle this time, he is really not sure to defeat the opponent. In particular, after meeting again, he clearly felt that the other party was stronger. If you say that your power has begun to weaken, then the convenience has entered a period of rapid growth. 2 people, one is like the setting sun in the west, and the other is like the rising sun. A new king is about to rise, a new king that is completely different from Roger. He is stronger, the aura of the king is stronger, and, faintly, this guy has also revealed new ideas. This is a terrible thought that can completely wipe out an era, and can burn everything. 3 days later, the Reaper boarded. Everyone was bored lying here to rest and play. There are 3 islands behind them, and a large number of Death God Pirates crew members are stationed on them. The number of them is 250,000. This is a terrifying amount. Every pirate is a powerful elite pirate. This is a powerful fighting force that can easily subvert a medium-sized country. So, Robin, have you decided? Go alone, the Great Channel. Yang Qing frowned as she looked at Robin with a persistent face, a little speechless. I don't know where Robin got the news. There are a few historical texts hidden in the first half, and this is simply the biggest temptation for Robin, who is obsessed with archaeology. The latter immediately proposed to go to the first half. You should bring a team, Robin. Moria put down her book and said with a smile. Robin shook his head. There are too many people, I don't want others to know my news. Then, she looked at Yang Qing. I must go. Yang Qing covered his forehead, very helpless. The two start a standoff, then argue. Finally, a week later, Robin left the New World in a single-person wooden boat for the first half of the Great Passage alone. Really, it's disturbing. This chapter is not over. Click on the next page to continue reading. The guy. Yang Qing shook his head, worried about Robin. In the Death God Pirates, the two weakest guys, Robin and Moria. Of course, they are not combatants either. And lowly, too young to be ignored. Chapter 353 Not Immortal. The departure of Robin made Yang Qing worried, but it did not affect the whole of the Death God Pirates. She walked quietly, and there were countless people covering up the news for her. Coupled with the strength she had cultivated over the years, she easily crossed the New World, crossed the Fishman Island, and came to the first half of the Great Waterway. Time continues to move forward. Yang Qing is practicing every day. He needs more powerful strength. Even at this moment, he was quite sure of defeating Whitebeard. In other words, from now on, he really became the most powerful man in the world. And the cadres of the Death God Pirates will naturally not slack off. Every day, they practice frantically. Too weak, they are still too weak compared to the captain. The perverted and powerful Yang Qing completely influenced these guys. Everyone has become the craziest cultivator. Because of this, the overall strength of the Death God Pirates is rapidly improving at a speed visible to the naked eye. One day, they will burst into spectacular achievements. Half a year later, Yang Qing heard a ding in his head, and the swordsman system responded. Congratulations to the host's strength for meeting the requirements, and opening the Sword Immortal secret book. Yang Qing was taken aback and looked at the system interface. I saw that above the previous martial arts cheats and swordsmanship, those question marks began to appear in his eyes one by one. Swordsmanship. Thousands of swords return to their ancestors. Sword God. The Dionysian charm. A large number of high-level swordsmanships that entered the Shenxia level appeared in Yang Qing's eyes, making him show such an expression as expected. He has already predicted that with the improvement of his strength, more high-end swordsmanship will inevitably appear. And these sword immortal techniques prove this. Shushan swordsmanship, secret books in the wind and clouds, and a lot of unknown swordsmanship. It's really powerful. Yang Qing glanced at these secrets carefully and sighed involuntarily. Of course, the price of these swordsmanships is also extremely expensive. By this time, the system has already opened the trading method of barter. In this pirate world, the devil fruit is the currency equivalent. Swordsmanship, a devil fruit. The method of creating a spirit sword, a devil fruit. The so-called method of creating a spirit sword is naturally the art of casting a sword. Compared with the Longchen sword used before, this sword tool created through the art of self-cultivation is a spirit tool, and various spiritual spells and formations can be added to it. Very wonderful. It can zoom in and out, fly in the sky, and even extremely powerful. It also has its own wisdom, that is, the sword spirit. Trading with devil fruits as a unit, this swordsman system has reached an expensive realm. It really leaves me speechless. All the devil fruits have been distributed to the crew. If I had known, I would have kept a few. Shaking his head, Yang Qing can only helplessly wait for the next time he gets the devil fruit before exchanging it. Now, let's develop my devil fruit first. Before the battle with Whitebeard, the control fruit awakened, and the awakening power at that time was just under control. At this time, the ability to control the fruit is constantly increasing. If he continues to practice, one day, Yangqing will be able to cover the entire star with the power of the devil fruit and control everything on the entire planet. In the blink of an eye, a year has passed. The four seas seemed calm, and the fierce battle between pirates and marines entered a relatively flat period of time. On this day, Ace found Yangqing. "Captain, I want to go to the first half." Pressing the hat on top of his head, Ace said with a smile. "Huh, are you going too?" Yangqing asked suspiciously. "Haha, Luffy is going to see, I'm going to see that kid." And Ace narrowed his eyes, and murderous intent shot out from his eyes. "I just got the news that Blackbeard has betrayed and killed the captain of the 4th Division of the Whitebeard Pirates. I can't tolerate people like this, escaping into the New World. I'm going to kill him, which was also a mistake in my last fight." Shrinking his eyes, Yangqing looked at Ace with a solemn look in his eyes. The inertia of history. In other words, the plot is irreversible. In the original book, Ace was arrested by the Marines for chasing Blackbeard, which eventually led to the Battle of the Top, and died here. After a moment of silence, Yangqing looked up at Ace. "New World, you still have tasks. You are the captain of the 2nd Division, and you can't just go to sea." Ace was startled, then scratched his head and said, "Captain, it's been very leisurely recently. The 4 emperors won't take any shots at us easily. We have Whitebeard on the left and Shanks on the right, so we won't encounter any danger at all." Quote. Then, Ace turned around and waved to Yangqing. "I'm leaving, boss, thank you. Something happens, call me back." With a loud laugh, Ace left the Reaper, also driving his wooden boat towards the Great Channel. Yangqing's forehead was full of black lines, and he was speechless. This kid really doesn't listen to Lao Su at all. I really want to clean him up. Dylan's laughed when he saw this scene. "Ha ha ha, you are nosy, Ace is very strong now. He is the captain of our 2nd Division. He is naturally burning fruit, and with 3 colors domineering, this kid is already the top combat power of our pirate team. Underscore. Even if it is a general, he can fight against it, so don't worry." Yangqing shook his head. This chapter is not over. Click on the next page to continue reading. "It's not like that, hey. I can only hope he's lucky." The face of Blackbeard flashed in his mind. For some reason, Yangqing was always a little worried. But on second thought, Ace is much stronger than the original at this moment, and Blackbeard should not be his opponent. In this way, quietly, the 2 of the Death Pirates left the New World, and unknowingly left the Death Ship. 3 days later, the red-haired ship slowly moored under the huge Reaper. The sudden arrival of the 4 sovereigns made the ships moored around the periphery a little turbulent and moved. They all looked at this place, wondering what happened. Dylan's and the others also looked at Shanks and the others who were slowly walking towards the deck. "What's the matter, Shanks, suddenly come to us?" Dylan's asked with a smile. Yangqing also raised his head and nodded with a smile. He felt something was wrong. How could Shanks come to him? "Let Ace come back. That kid, he's not something he can handle." Huh. Yangqing was stunned, looking at Shanks who strode towards him. "Blackbeard, that guy, not a mortal. Chapter 354 is not a good person." Eyes flashed, Yangqing stared at Shanks. What he didn't expect was that Shanks came here for this matter. In the original book, Shanks also went to Whitebeard. However, it ended in failure. "Did you see this scar? That guy did it." Shanks looked solemnly, pointing to the 3 marks on his left eye, which ran through the entire eye, looking a little terrifying. "That guy, isn't it? Ordinary people." Quote. His tone was very heavy, and his words were full of attention to Blackbeard. "Let Ace come back. That guy, maybe not Blackbeard's opponent." Shanks stared at Yangqing Dao closely, his eyes full of seriousness. Yangqing was silent, but did not immediately answer Shanks' words. After a full 2 minutes, a smile appeared on his face. Shanks, Ace is a member of the 2nd Division of my Death Pirates. I know his strength better than you. Lucifer, I'm serious, this is definitely not a joke. That guy is very dangerous. Shanks said solemnly. With a twinkle in his eyes, Yang Qing became serious. I'm serious too. I don't believe that Ace will be defeated by that guy. I know his strength very well. He is no longer the one he was 2 or 3 years ago. Shanks, Ace, very strong. Yes, Ace is strong. Chang has truly convinced the members of the Death God Pirates. The ability to burn the fruit of the natural system, coupled with the 3-color domineering, and his outstanding talent. At this moment, Ace has unlimited potential. He is really fighting in the footsteps of One Piece. Of course, this will definitely be behind Yang Qing. Lucifer, Ace is your crew, I hope you can guarantee his safety. Shanks said seriously. Yang Qing nodded. That's natural, I value him more than anyone else. I bet too much on him. A smile appeared on Shanks' face. He could understand Yang Qing. Just like he did with Luffy, Yang Qing bet everything on Ace. Don't worry, he won't have anything. In the end, Yang Qing comforted Shanks like this. Shaking his head and smiling bitterly, Shanks said, I hope so, otherwise, it will be a big problem. If the identity of One Piece's widow is exposed, the impact on the entire world can be imagined. Okay, since you're here, of course I can't let you go. Yang Qing pulled Shanks over. I've been bored to death by being alone recently. Tomorrow, let's go to the sea last time and go fishing for Sea King. Class. Then, he turned to look at Dylan's and the others, before he could speak. Haha, I've been waiting for you here. A series of sounds of bang 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 came out, and Dylan's and others put the wine jar and the food on the deck. The crew members of the Red Hair Pirates also had smiles on their faces. The purpose of their coming here is naturally not just for Ace. More, the wine of Shang Yangqing and others. As a Tianlong person, his status is respected, and his annual wine can be said to be a steady stream. Especially when the position is stable, Yang Qing and the Death God Pirates are in a very strange position. The middle position between the rebels and the court army, the world court dare not deal with him, and the pirates also respect him very much. A banquet started like this. The relationship between the two pirate groups has become very close over time, and it can be called a family. And just about a month later, Shanks and others had already left. On this day, Yang Qing suddenly stood up. He had a new idea. Dylan's, I'm going out for a walk. With a smile in his eyes, Yang Qing turned his back to the crew. Dylan's and the others raised their heads and looked at Yang Qing in amazement. What did you say? I'm going out and need something recently to improve my strength. This sentence shocked everyone. They are very clear to what level of strength Yang Qing has reached. But even so, the other party actually said that he can still improve his strength, which is really a terrifying human being. A white cloud appeared under his feet. Yang Qing flew up into the sky, and walked towards the entrance of the new world alone. He can fly, so he is free, convenient, and much faster. At the same time, in a small town called Windmill Town in the East China Sea, a boy with a big smile on his face pressed the straw hat on his head and jumped into the small wooden boat with a big smile. Ha ha ha, One Piece, I'm determined. Let's go, let's go. That guy Ace, he shouldn't be able to wait for me, ha ha ha. This kid, wearing a red vest, black shorts, and a pair of flip-flops on his feet, is full of hearty, open-minded, and optimistic aura, almost the same as Ace, very imaginative. It's just that Ace is a bit more gentleman than him. In Alabasta, in a dark basement. Thick smoke lingered, and the tall crocodile sat on the chair, looking at the slender figure in front of him, his eyes flickering. There is fear, but also a trace of excitement. Still unsure. Crocodile, whereabouts of historical texts, I've been here for 2 years. The woman shook her head, and her cowboy hat shook. Crocodile looked up, a smile on his face, looking very ferocious. Actually, We have already decided, it's just that things have to come as planned, right? Our goals are not in conflict, and it is naturally pleasant to be able to cooperate. The woman shook her head, a faint look on her face. This chapter is not over. Click on the next page to continue reading. Desert. She didn't answer, seemingly completely ignoring the vicious sand crocodile. Crocodile's face changed and he was angry in his heart, but he did not act rashly. The woman in front of him was useful to him, and the plan had to use this woman. Second, this woman is one of those guys after all, and her own strength is unpredictable, so he is not sure. And if the identity of this woman is exposed, then, it is conceivable that the entire first half of the Great Waterway will cause a huge earthquake. As soon as possible, I've learned the whereabouts of the other piece, I just don't know how to get there. Shaking her head, the woman left the basement. Step by step up the steps, and when she came under the sun, the woman's face appeared. It was Robin who left the Death God pirates. With the help of Reaper's vast intelligence system, Robin is very clear about the whereabouts of the historical text. That guy Anilu, when is he coming? It's really slow. Robin frowned and muttered. And the guy behind him, he's really not a good guy. Chapter 355 The Person Who Lost Me. Under the steps, Crocodile's figure appeared behind Robin, smoky, and his grim face appeared with a smile on his face after it appeared in the sun. Miss All Sunday, maybe you should do your own thing. Crocodile smiled. Robin didn't listen to Crocodile's words, she just nodded with a smile. Alabasta has changed from beautiful to desolate. You paid a lot for this, right? Crocodile laughed. Ha ha ha, is it desolate? No, I still think that Alabasta is the most beautiful. Here, in the near future, will become my imperial capital, and I will not tolerate it like this. Ugly as before. Shaking his head, Robin ignored the somewhat demented crocodile and walked away from here. At the same time, Ace's figure appeared in the Seven Waters. The orange hat, freckles on his face, and a smile all the time make the whole young boy full of energy and breath like a flame, and he is very popular with others. And under his deliberate concealment, it is naturally difficult for anyone to recognize him. Blackbeard, where have you been? What a cunning fellow. I have met the other party 3 times, but each time the other party can slyly escape. Even before I make any effort, the other party has already escaped. He seems to be afraid of himself, but he doesn't seem to be afraid at all. Compared with the war 2 years ago, this guy has grown a lot. It actually made Ace feel a little cautious in his heart, and felt that the other party was not easy to deal with. Because of this, I can't let him go. Taking the boat, Ace left here and headed for the first half of the Great Channel. He had news that the Blackbeard guy had appeared on Long Chain Island. And Yongqing, at this moment, appeared in the East China Sea. Stepping on the white clouds, the scenery beside him quickly passed by. Yongqing looked down with a smile on his face. The plot has already started. That is to say, that Kid Luffy has also set sail. It's interesting. Of course, the purpose of his trip was not Luffy. As one of the 5 emperors, his status are simply not comparable to a fledgling child at this moment. He is more interested in another thing, his own joining, and has set off such a big storm in the world of pirates. Then, will the original plot change? He was even more curious about this matter. Bucky was pulled into the pirate group by himself and became stronger. And Anilu has also become stronger. Compared with everything in the original book, what Luffy encounters and sees when he goes to sea this time will naturally be very different. Yongqing wants to see all this happen with his own eyes. His strength has entered a bottleneck, and now it has entered a stage of steady rise. Going a step further, he is going to step into that area and become the most powerful king in the sea. However, Luffy's departure to the sea and the development of the plot have become an opportunity for Yongqing. If you want to become a king, you still need a chance. And this opportunity, I have a hunch, is on Luffy this guy. This is the truth of Yongqing letting go of everything in the new world and going here alone. He wanted to see, step by step, what the protagonist Luffy would bring to him. It was a hunch, but it was all too clear. After flying into the East China Sea, Yang Qing drove again for about half an hour, his eyes flashed, and then he quietly fell. This is Kokoja village, a town that was attacked by pirates. And here, there is also a member of the Straw Hat Pirates in the original book, Nami. When Yang Qing fell to the ground, it was almost evening. Like a ghost, his figure suddenly appeared in this town. When the people in the village saw him, they couldn't help rubbing their eyes. You bastard, when did you come? The speaker was an old man who was bent over. Yang Qing smiled at him, and then left. Hey, you kid, if you break into this place by mistake, leave quickly. This place is not a place you can stay. You will be killed by them. The old man suddenly remembered something and shouted loudly. But before he finished speaking, Yang Qing's figure had disappeared. Somewhere in town, the builders here are very different from the towers everywhere. And the terrifying evil dragon pirates are stationed here. This is a group of fish-man pirates. They are vicious, cruel, greedy, and shameless. They occupied this town and plundered the wealth here. Such a pirate group can be said to be countless in the sea. They are not powerful, but they are more evil than many powerful pirate groups. It can be said that such a pirate group is the real scum. They have little morality and more of a harm to the world. In a sense, they are the real pirates. Yang Qing slowly walked into the tower. He came in an inexplicable and strange way, like a gust of wind, suddenly blowing into the courtyard. Who is your boy? A fishman suddenly saw Yang Qing and immediately shouted. This shout immediately alarmed the fish people in the courtyard. The dragon, who was lying down and resting, immediately opened his fierce eyes. Why do I look at him a little familiar? Octopus Little 8 said suspiciously. Hey, when you say that, I also think he looks familiar. I seem to have seen him somewhere. Hey, who are you? A fishman asked Yang Qing stupidly, but Yang Qing didn't answer, just chuckled and looked at the dragon who had stood up. Inheriting the innate strength of the Murlocs, the dragon's body is also very tall. This chapter is not over. Click on the next page to continue reading. Big and powerful. When he saw Yang Qing for the first time, he was stunned, and felt a little familiar, and after the second glance, the dragon's heart pounded violently. No, impossible. He's not, he can't be that guy. But, why is it so similar? He stared at Yang Qing's face closely, but he was looking at it, but this face overlapped with the terrifying guy in his mind. That's him. Is it really him? There were excitement, fear, respect, and different expressions in the eyes of the evil dragon. Looking at Yang Qing, he spoke with a trembling voice. Is that you? Yang Qing shook his head and smiled softly. There are Murlocs here, which really surprised me. However, it's really the one who lost me. It's really him. The dragon trembled in his heart, and his face showed excitement. Chapter 356 in the Orange Garden. This face, the evil dragon, is naturally very clear. There is no Murloc who does not have a deep memory of the death god who rudely snatched the Murloc from the hands of Whitebeard. He broke the record in history and completely included the Murloc in his own control, and he does not reject the Murlocs at all. What is even more miraculous is that his pirate group has a large number of Murlocs. This is a subversive progress, which makes countless Murlocs excited, worship, and even believe in it. Yes, for the worship of the god of death, the fish people have become a kind of belief. Therefore, at this moment, the moment the evil dragon saw Yang Qing and recognized him, there was reverence in his eyes, followed by panic. He clearly heard what Yang Qing just said, and he lost himself. There is no doubt that what he has done has indeed lost the face of the Murloc. I took great pains to list Fishman Island in the World Court Peace Alliance, and signed an irreversible peace agreement with the court, in order to allow the fishmen and humans to truly live in peace. And you, here, are fighting against with such a powerful force. I have really lost my face, and I have lost the face of Fishman Island. Yang Qing shook her head lightly. Every word made the dragon's body shake violently, and his eyes were full of horror. "You stinky boy, who are you?" There were fishmen next to him who still didn't recognize Yang Qing's identity and shouted loudly. But after he said a word, Yang Qing turned his head suddenly, his icy eyes staring at the murloc who spoke. No breath came out, but the mental will shot out of that scorpion instantly made the murloc's eyes turn white, fell directly to the ground, and fainted. This strange scene alarmed the fish people present and made them exclaim, "Sir, let them go, they are all my companions." The dragon cried out in horror. Yang Qing turned his eyes and looked at the evil dragon. "I'm too lazy to take care of your shit, but remember, the sins you've done will eventually be repaid by yourself." Turning around, Yang Qing left here. Seeing Yang Qing leave here, evil dragon breathed a sigh of relief, his eyes flashed and his face changed. In the end, it is still fierce. The Lord said he wouldn't care, so he definitely won't care. I'll leave after I finish this. Compared with the Great Waterway, the human beings here are too weak. And Yang Qing, after leaving here, went to a place in Kokoja village. Half an hour later, the blue-haired woman looked at Yang Qing and said in shock, "You are an outsider, why are you here?" As the woman spoke, she pulled Yang Qing into the room. "Shish, don't let them find out, otherwise, you will be in danger. How dare you, you bastard, dare to break into the dragon's territory?" Yang Qing smiled. "First time meeting, my name is Lucifer, please give me more advice." "I don't care what your name is, it's better to sneak back in secretly, otherwise, you are too dangerous." Nuo Qigao said angrily, "There are still people who dare to break into this place, are you dying?" "My boat is broken, I have no choice. I can only swim to the nearest island and come here like this." Yang Qing shrugged and spread out his hands helplessly. Nuochi was stunned for a moment, then smiled, "Then you are lucky." After a second, her face turned gloomy. "Here, you will be greeted by hell, unfortunate humans." Yang Qing was startled, then smiled and said, "Hell and heaven can't leave me." Then, he stood up and looked around the small room. "Nice place, little girl, I have been living here recently, thank you for your hospitality." A black line appeared on Nuochi's high forehead, standing behind Yang Qing with his fist raised and loudly said, "Hey, how old are you, call me a little girl, and who promised you to live here?" Yang Qing waved his hand and smiled magnanimously, "Thank you, I have nowhere to go." Nuo Qigao was speechless, but as Yang Qing said, he really had nowhere to go. If this guy wandered around for a while and was discovered by the evil dragons, he would definitely die and never die again. "I'm unlucky." In the end, 4 words decided Yang Qing's stay. Looking at the sullen blue-haired girl, Yang Qing smiled and looked out the window. There is a blooming orange tree, very beautiful, the wind is blowing gently, blowing the orange garden, the branches and leaves are floating, it is very beautiful. Nice orangery, quote. He sighed in admiration, but got no response from Nuochigao. He shook his head and smiled, then walked out into the orange orchard. Gently pluck an orange, peel it, and toss it in your mouth, the sweet and sour flavor sweeps your taste buds. A smile appeared on Yang Qing's face, and he couldn't help but admire again. "This orange, just like you, is gentle and sweet. Little girl." Nuo Qigao looked at the handsome young man outside the window, and couldn't help staring at the smile on his face in a daze. After a few seconds, her face turned red. Fuck, hooligan. In this way, Yang Qing lived in Nuo Qigao's orange orchard. 3 days later, the dragon looked gloomily at the murloc in front of him. "You mean, my lord, he stayed at the house of that woman named Nuo Qigao?" "Yes." There was a puzzled expression on the face of the dragon, and he felt a little uneasy. "Why in the end? Also, what is the purpose of your presence here?" Eyes changed many times, the dragon finally. This chapter is not over, click on the next page to continue reading. Gritted his teeth. "No matter what, I won't affect the adults. Don't bother your lord, we'll go on with our own business." He instructed the other party, and the Murloc nodded in agreement. By the way, what about the little girl last time? Has she been out for a long time? I guess she'll be back soon. Every time she comes back, she can bring a lot of wealth, a very capable little girl. The fishman said with a smile. Hey, it's really capable. Unfortunately, it's of no use at all. The evil dragon laughed wickedly. In the orange orchard, the dragon should not know Yangqing's existence. Yangqing is also here, living a rare and leisurely life. Nuao Qigao is a tough-mouthed, but in fact, very gentle woman. After Yangqing got along with him for a while, he understood very well. I heard that you have a younger sister. Nuo Qigao, where has she gone? One day, Yangqing asked casually. Nuo Qigao's face changed, and after a long time, he said angrily, if you shouldn't ask, don't ask. Know too much and they'll kill you. Yangqing's eyes flashed and nodded with a smile, got it. Chapter 357 3 months later, in the relatively quiet village, there was a loud noise. Yangqing's eyes flashed, and a smile appeared in his eyes. Here they come. Nuao Qigao seemed to have thought of something, and ran out in a hurry. Even at this moment, Yangqing didn't even have time to say hello. The sound of boom rumble began to keep coming, and in the yard where the dragon was, there was a series of battles and roars. Yangqing was half lying on Nuoki's high chair, closed his eyes, and pictures began to flash. Luffy, help me. The woman with orange hair, the cry of grief resounded in his ears. At this moment, even if he didn't face it in person, Yangqing could still feel the deep friendship contained in it. Finally, when a loud bang came out, excited shouts came out. It's over. Yangqing opened her eyes. That Straw Hat Boy really deserves to be the protagonist. With a sigh, Yangqing stepped forward and walked towards the town. Luffy has a unique temperament, different from Shanks, different from Whitebeard, and different from Yangqing. This is a very unique temperament. If I had to use words to describe it, it would be reliability, a strong sense of reliability. Every partner who trusts him can feel the sense of security contained in this figure. In the original book, Luffy's vigor and spirit are very obvious, and it can make anyone feel the strong positive energy in him, which makes people's blood boil. And in this real world, Yangqing saw this kid's charisma at close range. When I walked to the center of the town, I was really excited. Yangqing glanced at the place and saw the cheerful smile on the blue-haired girl's face, and couldn't help but laugh out loud. It has to be said that a smile is contagious. He turned his head and left here, and after a few steps, he came to the gang of evil dragons who were about to flee. Where are you going? The faint voice made the embarrassed evil dragon group immediately tense up. Big, my lord. The dragon turned around and saw Yangqing, with tears in his eyes. He seemed excited, regretful, and fearful. His knees softened and he fell to his knees. In front of Yangqing, Sir, help me, help me. I want to live. Yangqing was expressionless as he looked at the evil dragon in front of him. You're lucky you're not dead yet. But it also verifies my conclusion. The world is causal, endless, and this is your retribution. The dragon cried, his forehead pressed to the ground. At this moment, he is no longer as vicious as before. If you can still be alive after arriving in the new world, I will give you a chance. Yangqing said lightly, then turned around, ignoring the evil dragon group. Captain of the Murloc team, I miss you. You should know his name, and if you are lucky enough to see him, join his team. Quote. The dragon trembled all over, raised his forehead, and knocked again heavily. Thank you, sir. Tears flowed, and the heart was moved, excited, or any other emotion, the dragon has been unable to describe. After Yangqing left the evil dragon, he once again came to the side of everyone who had begun to celebrate at this moment. Nuo Qigao had sharp eyes and found Yangqing. Hey, Lucifer, come here. Ha ha ha. The blue-haired girl smiled happily, and Yangqing was infected and walked over with a smile. Is your mind relieved? asked softly. Yang Qing took the rum from Nuo Qigao. Well, it's relieved, that's great. Nuo Qigao, with crystal tears in her eyes, looked at the smiling orange-haired girl in the crowd, her eyes full of joy. Is that your sister? Yang Qing asked. Yes, she is my sister. Nuo Qi nodded and affirmed, my dearest relative in this world. But you don't have the same hair. Yang Qing asked strangely. Go to hell. Nuo Qigao pinched Yang Qing fiercely, causing the latter to cry out in pain. Celebrated overnight, and on the second day, everyone was groggy. At this moment, Nami discovered Yang Qing next to Nuo Qigao and asked strangely, who is this guy? Lucifer, a stinky gangster who eats and drinks. Nuo Qigao said angrily. With a clear smile on her face, Nami joked, ha ha, Nuo Qigao, I understand. Do you like him? Nuo Qi blushed and shouted loudly, how is it possible, that guy, who knows how to play cool lazily all day long, it's useless at all, who would like him? Ha ha ha, don't get excited, I'll just talk about it. Nami said with a smile. However, it's not bad to have someone you like, Nuo Qigao. Nuo Qi was stunned for a moment, then fell silent. He's not like an ordinary man. Huh? Nami asked suspiciously. I can see that there is no fear in his eyes. I didn't understand it before, but when I saw Luffy and the others, I understood. A man with such eyes is definitely not ordinary. That guy is not ordinary. He won't stay here. Ah, Nami was stunned. His eyes could not help but drift to the young man, and the lazy smile on his face was always the same, exuding an inexplicable charm. At first glance, it is very tasty. And his eyes are terrifying. This chapter is not over. Click on the next page to continue reading. The sharpness seems to be deliberately hidden. Who is that guy? Nami was very curious as such a question emerged in her heart. Soon, the Straw Hat Pirates left here. After leaving here with a smile, among the crowd at the port, there was a person with a lazy smile. It was Yang Qing himself. On the third day, a bounty fell from the sky. Yang Qing waved and grabbed the bounty in his hand. Looking at the big smiling face on the bounty, he couldn't help but smile. Monkey D. Luffy, bounty, 30 million, life or death. Have you finally taken the first step? Then, he raised his eyes and looked at Nuo Qigao, who was singing an unknown song in the orange garden. His eyes flashed. Nuo Qigao, he suddenly called out. His voice was deeper than usual. Huh? Nuo Qigao's body trembled, and he realized something. I'm leaving, Yang Qing said softly. The scissors in his hand suddenly fell, hitting the ground heavily. Really? Chapter 358 Weird. Yang Qing's body trembled, and then he saw the blue-haired girl slowly turn around. At the moment when she turned around, the woman's shoulders were still slightly trembling and shaking, but when she completely faced herself, the woman had returned to normal, and her face was full of smiles. I'm finally leaving, you bastard. You have been eating and drinking for so long, doing nothing. I've already bored you, hurry up. Nuo Qi scolded with a high smile. Her eyes were no longer I can't find the panic and a trace of sadness just now. With a stunned look on his face, Yang Qing laughed. He took a few steps and came to Nuo Qigao after a few steps. Without doing anything, Yang Qing just stared at Nuo Qigao with such determination, until the woman looking at her was nervous, awkward, and flushed, and he just said with a chuckle. Hee hee, actually, you're very pretty. Nuo Qigao was shocked, and he was about to say something, but Yang Qing had already stepped directly beside him and picked an orange. I'll have one of your oranges at the end. Goodbye, Nuo Qigao. Tossing the oranges in his hands, Yang Qing took a step, but the person had already ascended into the sky and flew away. In the blink of an eye, Nuo Qigao could no longer see him. Looking up at the black spot that was getting farther and farther in shock, Nuo Qigao was a little sluggish until it disappeared. After a long time, she just came back to her senses. Sure enough, you are no ordinary guy. With a complicated look in his eyes, Nuo Qigao clenched his fists. But why won't you help me? Quietly, Nuo Chigao left such a knot in his heart. Why didn't he do it? Yang Qing asked himself, but in the end he didn't get any results. Is it because he doesn't want to, or is it because of the plan in his heart, perfect execution? In the end, Yang Qing, after all, is just a selfish person. If someone can solve things, he will never intervene on his own accord without affecting his own plans. Stepping on the white clouds, Yang Qing looked down at the sea below. Half an hour later, he heard the excited screams of a pirate ship sailing on the sea. Ha ha ha, I finally got a devil fruit. Alrita, will become stronger, that boy with the straw hat, I will never spare him, ha ha ha. This is a rough female voice. Yang Qing's eyes flashed, and a smile appeared on his face immediately. He could see that this woman was Arita. That is, the first soy sauce character that Luffy met after he went out to sea. An ant with a stout body and an ugly face, but she considers herself to be unparalleled in beauty. Devil fruit. It's not bad, I finally got the harvest. Yang Qing's face was full of smiles. He didn't forget that he came out this time, and there was another task, which was to collect devil fruits and exchange them for the new ones on the list. Sword skills. Moreover, the long spring sword has been broken for so long, and he has never been able to use the appropriate sword skills. After the Battle of Whitebeard, Yang Qing has combined his swordsmanship and fruit ability, and then integrated the three-color domineering into one. It can be said that his strength has once again climbed a level, reaching a level that he could never imagine before. Hi! If there is another battle with Whitebeard, then it must be him who persists to the end. After flying and falling, Yang Qing directly withdrew the power to fly and let the body fall down freely. The sound of the wind was whistling beside his ears, and Yang Qing's entire robes were rattling by the strong airflow. 5 seconds later, a shock wave had formed in front of him, and after 3 seconds, he turned into a meteor-like falling object, with a whistling sound, and charged towards Alrita's pirate ship. Huh! A sharp whistling sounded, and Arita couldn't help but look up, and her expression changed immediately. What is that? Tell me, what is that? Grabbing the skinny pirate beside her, Arita shouted fiercely. I don't know. The pirate was so frightened that he almost wet his pants. His legs trembled. Yes, is it a meteorite? Go to your mother's meteorite, this is the sea. Will the meteorite come here from the sky? You idiot! The pirate who slapped Alita turned 3 times, and then fell on the deck with a bruised nose and a swollen face. Navigator, dodge that guy for me. Alrita commanded loudly again. Of course, basically without her command, the navigator was already sweating profusely and started to control the ship. However, as time passed by, their faces became even more ugly, staring at the meteorite that was already burning with flames, their whole bodies trembling and shaking in fear. After 3 breaths, the gust of wind was already blowing from the sky, and the entire pirate ship was shaking. The pirates on it screamed in horror. The wind was so strong that even their robes were blown, and some people with light bodies were even blown backwards. Help! Help! In this vast sea, the pirates actually began to call for help. It was so shocking, the flames burning in the sky that day, no one knew what it was. However, everyone was extremely shocked and terrified. This sky is a terrifying existence. It's really unfortunate how they met. Hoo 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 hoo. The wind was strong, and the pirate ships were blown out of the cracks. Then, after 3 breaths, the flame was unreasonable, and the arrogant head slammed into the pirate's clothes. Bang! The raging flames burned from the pirate ship, which was not a small pirate ship, and it was torn apart in an instant, and countless pirates were blown away in horror. This chapter is not over. Click on the next page to continue reading. Immediately afterwards, everyone saw a figure standing up slowly in the fading flames. People. It's human. My God, it's actually human. Every pirate was frightened. They couldn't believe that a human fell from such a high place and didn't die. Instead, their ship was blown to pieces, which was simply too shocking. And the ant-like Arita was even more frightened. Her thick legs trembled, and the mace in her hand fell to the ground with a bang. You, she repeated 3 times, but still didn't say a complete sentence. Because the person who stood up just appeared in front of her, face to face with her. The indifferent expression and the invisible momentum instantly shocked Alrita and made her fear to the extreme. Weird, really weird. Chapter 359 Suffocation. You, who are you? Alrita's voice was out of tune and looked a little sharp. Yang Qing was expressionless, glanced at the ugly and somewhat disgusting fat woman in front of him, and said coldly, "What an ugly woman, get away." When these words came out, the face of Arita, who was still a little frightened, changed immediately. Her whole face was flushed, and anger poured into her head. "Stinky boy, you are courting death." Yalita waved, punching Yang Qing with her fist. "I can't see the big waste of the world," Yang Qing said coldly. His voice was slow and deep, his right hand stretched out and out, trembling slightly. A strange force poured out directly and swept through Alrita, who was shocked, and the anger on his face disappeared suddenly, turning into panic. "What is this? Hand over the devil fruit. I can spare your life, or die here." Yang Qing's voice was very cold, almost without any emotion. "He has no spare time to play with these weak guys. The purpose is just devil fruits." "That fruit. You are for that fruit." Alrita's face changed, then she hesitated for a long time, and finally cherished her own life. "That fruit is not in my hands." "Huh." Yang Qing's face turned cold, and the power to control the fruit immediately extended. Alrita's fat face became hideous, and her hands couldn't help reaching her neck, where she seemed to be imprisoned by a pair of hands, making it difficult for her to breathe. In the box." Struggling, Arita spewed these words out of her mouth. After saying a word, Arita took a deep breath. The force that held her neck disappeared, but at this moment, she was still under the opponent's control. Because her body is still in the air, her own consciousness can't even control her body. This strange scene made this fat ant feel chills in her heart. What kind of strange power is this? Box. Yang Qing's eyes flashed, and then began to search around. The sea is in ruins, fragments of ships. The complete pirate ship before was directly smashed into slag by Yu Wei, who fell. In such a chaotic environment, finding a box can be difficult. Frowning, Yang Qing looked at Yalita in the air again, making the latter sweat dripping from her forehead, terrified. Here, the devil fruit is here." At this moment, a thin boy held a red box in his hand, raised it in his hand, and shouted in fear. Yang Qing rolled his eyes, and the power of controlling the fruit moved, and the box flew directly out of the thin pirate's hand, and then threw it into the air. When it was in the air, the box had automatically opened, revealing the devil fruit inside. It's this, Alrita said loudly, secretly relieved. She finally saved her life. The skinny pirate looked extremely cute in her eyes at this moment, and she swore that after the terrifying guy in front of her left, she would take good care of that kid. Catching the devil fruit in one hand, Yang Qing swept his eyes and nodded. Yes, it is indeed a devil fruit. Then, he looked at Alrita and nodded to the person in front of him. Arita breathed a sigh of relief, because she found that the power that controlled her had disappeared, and the next moment, she fell heavily on the remaining deck, causing the sea to splash. Just when she was glad that she finally got her life back, something unexpected happened to her. The indifferent young man took a few steps to her. Then, a punch came out suddenly. This punch was so fast that Alrita couldn't react at all, and it was too heavy. It was so heavy that the surrounding pirates were horrified to see that a force of energy hit directly from Alrita's bent waist. After moaning and moaning a few times in pain, Alrita's eyes were confused, and then she fell heavily on the deck, losing her breath. She didn't understand until she died. Even though she had found the devil fruit, why would the person in front of her still kill her? And, how can this guy be so strong? It's just a punch, and he can't even take a punch. Arita is dead. It took 5 full seconds before a terrified scream came out. The pirates floated on the sea, holding the broken deck, looking at the figure in the field with shock in their eyes. After slowly withdrawing his fist, Yang Qing glanced at everyone, and then left a blank sentence. Although misbehaving is the way of pirates, but... After a cold meal, he continued. Pirates also have morals. Like this bottomless scum, they don't even have the qualifications to survive in the weakest 4 seas. His voice was cold and domineering, and with the momentum of killing Alrita with one punch, he immediately shocked all the pirates present. Quiet, quiet, no one dared to speak at this moment. Then, Yang Qing stepped up and left. Who is he? Cool. This guy is so cool, I want to follow him. Yeah, although he killed Alrita, he is really imposing. The pirates exclaimed and said that for Alrita, they were more afraid, but did not have a trace of respect, and they died when they died, which did not affect their mood. Quick, quick, find out the identity of this guy. He is definitely not a simple guy if he can kill Alrita with one punch. This chapter is not over. Click on the next page to continue reading. Quote. Maybe, he is also a pirate. Among the 4 seas, the East China Sea is the weakest. Many people are not clear about the New World, or even the first half of the Great Passage. Because no one would gossip about guys who are countless levels higher than him, just like Yang Qing's previous life, he wouldn't inquire about how many women Ao slept with every night. For Yang Qing, many people only know his name, but more people don't know what he looks like. However, after a quarter of an hour, one person took out a bounty with trembling and shaking hands, and the pirates floating on the sea were suffocated. Chapter 363 Steps to Casting a Sword. Death, 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 Lucifer. One of the 5 emperors, he is one of the 5 emperors, the god of death who is tied with Whitebeard. The bounty is 1.7 billion Bailey. The most powerful guy in the world. He is known as the guy who can ascend the throne of the Thief King of Shanghai City with great probability, achieve great things, and open up a new era. The pirates, pupils widened, their saliva spurted far away, and they shouted excitedly. It's him, it's him. We actually saw Lucifer, one of the 5 emperors, the real pirate king, the big pirate at the top of countless pirates. He is the real big pirate. At this moment, after learning Yang Qing's true identity, these pirates were all excited and excited. As for fear, they no longer have it. What are the identities of the 5 emperors? Even a pirate group that is countless times stronger than them will be afraid when they see it, but more of it is awe. The emperor among the pirates should naturally be revered by countless pirates. Being able to see one of the 5 emperors made these pirates extremely excited. Invisibly, the gorgeous corner of Yang Qing's power, his figure has left a deep impression on these pirates, and it has been enlarged invisibly. Not long after that, the name of the god of death slowly resounded in the 4 seas. This is something Yang Qing can't imagine. His name and prestige are more spread among the upper classes of the world, the strongest among pirates. However, compared to the people at these peaks, the pirates at the bottom, the commoners are incomprehensible. This trivial shot was just a starting point. With Yang Qing's actions in the world without his knowledge in the future, his fame will spread again. And this time, it will be the whole world. At a certain point, this is also the only way to become one piece. Reverence, conquest, prestige, strength, these are what a king should have. Yang Qing is already complete and perfect, but he still lacks a little bit, just that little bit, which will prevent him from reaching the top. These conditions are intangible, but real. Flying in the sky, about half a day later, Yang Qing came to Rog Town. This is the last transfer station in the East China Sea, occupying very important topographical conditions. When he came here, on the one hand, Yang Qing was following the trail of the Straw Hats, but on the other hand, it was because he would meet an expected person here. Standing on the coast of Rog Town, Yang Qing looked up at the sky with an inexplicable smile on the corner of his mouth. He still remembers the battle when he first went to sea. To be able to reach a tie with himself, Long's talent and strength can be imagined. After so many years, is the former opponent still strong today? Although Yang Qing didn't say that he wanted to have a real battle with the opponent, he was very curious and wanted to try it. Just by touching it, he can roughly judge whether the opponent's strength is similar to himself, or stronger than himself, or weaker than himself. Walking towards Rog Town on foot, Yang Qing is also interested in seeing what changes here after many years. He walks alone, and with his unique fruit ability, even if he is seen by others, he will not only recognize him in his heart. Half a day later, with a smile on his face, Yang Qing saw the execution platform in the center of Rog Town. There was a touch of nostalgia in his eyes, recalling the past. I once stepped on this high platform step by step, and now I revisit the old place. I have a strange feeling. It's not far, only one step away, only one step away. After muttering, Yang Qing smiled and turned to leave. I found a hotel at random. After Yang Qing stayed, he closed the door and prepared to exchange the new secret book generated by the previous system evolution. It is very necessary for me to master the technique of refining the sword. The attack power and comprehensive combat power of the spirit sword are much stronger than that of ordinary iron. Above the mortal iron is the spiritual tool. Compared with the unconscious mortal iron, the spiritual tool is not only tougher and sharper, but more importantly, it has a spirit that is the same as the living body. In a sense, the reason why the spiritual tool is called a spirit is because it exists out of the mortal body. Without hesitation, Yang Qing directly exchanged the devil fruit from Alrita. Consuming a devil fruit, the host will obtain the method of forging a spirit sword, which will be directly poured into the host's mind. Please pay attention to check it. The dull voice of the system sounded, and after Yang Qing was stunned, he felt that a large amount of information was forcibly packed into his mind. After half an hour, Yang Qing rubbed his temples and opened his eyes. It's really broad and profound. This is just a way to get started, and it's just like this, changing. It is indeed a metamorphosis, and the method of creating the spirit sword that the system entrusts to him is very cumbersome. It is not as simple as taking materials. Casting is as simple as that. It divides the method of creating spiritual energy into 3 steps, taking the meaning of 3 births in all things. The first step, quenching, that is, selecting the material, quenching the iron, leaving only the essence and removing the dross. At this stage, the material is not required. Any material can be used, but in the end, only the essence of the material will be left. Then, it is to model these essences to produce a sword shape, which is called a sword chick in the cheats. The second step is to engrave the spirit energy into the sword yung and condense the sword formation. This step sounds simple, but it is extremely difficult to complete. There are many kinds of sword formations, and the host can print them one by one according to their needs. Even if the swords are completed, they can still supplement the sword formations. Therefore, this step is also the longest step. The third part is casting spirit, forging the spirit of swords. This step requires the blood of countless creatures and the magic sword that engraves the sword array. This chapter is not over. Click on the next page to continue reading. It will absorb the blood of the creature, and then condense the blood spirit. The blood spirit that was initially born only has a killing consciousness and overflowing murderous aura. With the cultivation of the host's sword intent, it will eventually grow into a sword spirit. This is the 3 steps of casting a sword, which is very cumbersome, and it is many times more difficult than the casting of ordinary iron. But fortunately, the system directly instilled the method of casting swords into Yang Qing's mind, allowing him to master the relevant knowledge in an instant, just like cheating. Next, I'll go to Rogue Town first and find some materials. Try slowly. One day, I will create a sword that belongs to me. There is a secret book that says, if the sword is out, the sword will shock the world, shake the world, there will be swords roaring the world, the scene is spectacular, and the sword intent will soar to the sky.